Well, welcome back, everyone. Gore, I think we're back. I can't see. Gore, I can't see anything. Can you...
Dave, look, I'd tell you to follow the sound of my voice, but we're online. You're going to have to buy a ward, man.
Is it this? This?
No, Dave, that's war. That's not a ward.
One of these?
No, that's a wart, Dave. That grows on your hand. A ward.
Oh, a ward, like this.
I mean, I think that's a ward. Like, I see the base and everything, but I don't know what that is hovering above it. I haven't seen that in game.
That's a chair. It's a chair. Yeah, you haven't seen it in game. Oh, God, I can't rip this thing off my head fast enough. It is going to be in game, Gore. If you buy a SMITE Maxonomic chair, you're going to get an in-game ward skin now. Order the official SMITE chair. Maxonomic, our chair sponsor here in the SPL. And now you're going to get to show that you own one of these fantastic chairs. If you buy one, you're going to get an in-game ward skin, not a wart skin or a war skin, but a ward skin. This is a chair ward. Thank you very much. So Maxonomic, order yourself a SMITE chair today, and you get a ward skin in-game. Cannot wait to see how that one turns out. Gore Miser, though, we are back.
Your art skills know no bounds, man.
Well, that's really what carries it, right? It's the fantastic drawing that really carry this through and through. We're back, though, Gore, you and I, to round out the day here, and we've got a great set. I mean, and I don't think it can be understated. Radiance up against PK. PK, a team, struggled a little bit early on. Radiance, a team that looked fantastic. Going to be a blast to watch.
And it's so weird to preface this. I feel almost bad saying it this way. But you have to remember, PK were kind of bottom towards middle of the pack all last year when they were able to come up and win a world championship. So it's not saying much now. The one loss they had, it's over to Space Station, who we just have a phenomenal game
they look good
there against Sanguine. So not anything really to write them off about. I think that they're a team to keep your eyes on. Obviously, picking up Cuvo has been good for them. They played very well in the first phase. But the problem is that Radiance, are still that super team that everybody was kind of talking about. The only time they seemed to have bad games was if they were up against any of those three names that are sitting with them in the top four.
Well, Radiance 1-0 over E United 2-0 in week one was their win. Of course, PK, according to the standings, still searching for their first win. Let's jump off, though, Gore Miser. Let's talk about Radiance here a little bit. And, they obviously have a lot of pressure coming into the season. I'm not sure the players themselves feel like this overwhelming sense of pressure, but as viewers watching them, we're seeing these big names. We're thinking, this team's got to win. And they did over E United pretty convincingly in week one. Maybe you argue a similar opponent here in PK for week number two. Kind of top to bottom looking at this roster, though, Gore, I think adapting kind of stands out. I think he needs to stand out given where the jungle meta is at the moment.
Yeah, I honestly think that adapting has been one of just the biggest carry for them in the past. Throughout Phase 1, he was phenomenal for them. Again, top kills on the team, being able to come through and set up a lot. He was the top first bloods on the team as well. He is the one that is making the strides for this team. He's opening up the opportunities. And then it is the follow-up, whether it comes from Cyclone Spin, whether Aurora is helping set it up. It's always going to be who is behind him to make sure these things get locked down. And that's where I turn my eyes a little bit towards mid. I think Big Man Tings has a really big role here. Of course, Cyclone Spin, last week we got to see him solo a Fire Giant, and in its entirety is Kronos. And they're the only team that pulled that one out, as a Magical Hunter. Kronos was the only one, or Magical Carry, I should say. He was the only one that picked it up. And it worked well enough for them then, so I think they have that flexibility built into their draft as well and their composition as a team.
That's a good point, because I remember week one, we're kind of watching these games, and basically every set I keep asking, man, when's the Kronos going to come back out? That's the Radiant special here after week number one. So I think these guys have got to feel great with the way their phase has started, especially against a team in week one like E United. They're hard to pin down, but they can kind of bring it on any given day, so I think a fantastic way for Radiance to start themselves off here, Gore Miser. Do you think, and this is kind of a high-level question, do you think it's more important for Radiance to get another win here today to kind of prove to themselves that they're really in that groove, get this phase started off right, or do you think it's more important for the Knights to get their first win?
I actually think it's more important for Radiance. I think the Knights kind of recognize that they, again, going back to last year, you don't have to be at the top if you're the Knights in order to then get to the top when it matters, right? I think Radiance are definitely in that groove, though, where if they can hit that stride early, all of a sudden it's not the question of, man, they're good, but can they take on Ghost Gaming? Or,
right.
They're doing fine, but can they beat Space Station? It's, oh, this is going to be a hype matchup because we know both of these teams are good. And I think that's what Radiance really need, is just that nice initial kicker at the very beginning of a phase just to prove themselves.
I agree. I think that's where my brain was kind of leaning. Not that it's not important for the Knights to get a win here either. 0-2 against SSG, a team that's shot out of a cannon so far in here in Phase 2. So let's talk about the Knights a little bit, Gormizer. And actually, we talked about adapting, I think, for Radiance. I think Cubo Fred is not a bad leaping off point here. And Paul, of course, I think lends the conversation to some interesting picks that the Knights have leaned in towards. But I think, actually, this game specifically, Cubo Fred got this one started off fantastically, so I expect big things from the PK jungler here today.
Yeah, once again, very easy comparisons. Highest first bloods on the team for him, highest kills for them throughout Phase 1, so it makes sense that he's been doing well. KDA tends to lean towards Paul, like you had kind of mentioned. That's honestly the same so far here in Phase 2 as well. But I think the thing that the Knights have... I don't even know if it's a secret weapon. Everyone kind of gets it now, but it's just they are going to be able to play well, no matter what they pick. And that's something that I think is just phenomenal for them. I mean, we get highlights of Scary D. We got to see him pull out a Matarasu when no one else was playing it. And he was such a huge threat, no one could get aggressive. You get Zapman, who has just consistently proven himself to be a great hunter and just a great role player throughout the many, many, many years of SMITE that he's been going. And, of course, you get Paul's flexibility there in mid where he can pull out things like we've seen either the Hell, the Hebo, some of these that aren't picked. I believe we got to see a Morrigan last week. I think that they are willing to play anything and everything that is available in SMITE, and that is where their strength really lies because they can do it, and they can do it damn well. I
agree. I think flexibility an absolute key here for the Knights. I am curious, and this is maybe a good segue into picks and bans here in a little bit. We saw Rat, I think, once or twice, and it was in the support role. Where's the guy been? I thought he was going to be in this meta a lot more with those Acorn changes. Do you think at any point here over the next few weeks we maybe see another Ratatosker or two?
Well, I thought Crit Acorn was going to be the one that took off for Ratatosker, right? Because theoretically, hey, man, 20% crit early on, I kind of love that. But I will admit, after seeing what Raffer did last week, I started scooping up the Rat over there as a support. And, man, you can get, if you just harken some health items over there, get like a Oni Hunter's Guard, it just works so well. And you feel so good. You do a lot of damage in the process. I think he feels really solid over there in support role. I don't know if this is the game where he gets pulled out, but if we're going to see him, that's kind of where I'm liking him.
Yeah, it was Raffer in support or Paul on Morrigan in mid. That was Rat. Every once in a while. Picks and bans, though, for this big matchup between Radiance and the Knights. That'll be where the story is told a little bit further on. We obviously put a good microscope on the jungle here in this matchup, and then the hard-to-lock-down flexibility of the Knights on their side, specifically with Paul. I think if we're going to talk about Paul, we got to mention BMT, though. I think he's done a good job of being a great role player here for this team. He's really taken in to those mid-lane hunters, I think, very well, so I think that's something we need to be on the lookout for as well, Gore, some of those more ability-based mid-lane hunters for BMT.
Yeah, I think that's actually, the strength that in my eyes, for the Knights were that, hey, when everyone was playing Merlin Raijin, Paul could play it, but he'd also whip out 3 or 4 different other gods to just make things look good. I think right now Radiance are, like you said, kind of in the same vein. Olorun, I think, is very flexible. He can go mid, he can go over towards that carry in the duo lane. But it is that presence of, man, I can pick on her or Neith, Uller, and send them all mid, and it's going to work out well. And even though we didn't get to see a whole lot of it, Neith, I think, is one of the ones that really does hold down mid lane just incredibly well. And I think a lot of the itemization lately does help her out, much like some other hunters, but you do have to, again, focus on where your priority is. She's going to do a lot of good burst damage, but there's also a lot of mages that can do that as well. Stacking up on magical damage isn't going to hurt you as much as stacking up on physical damage, so maybe that's something you have to play around with.
I like the Neith ban there as an answer from the Knights. Taken off the board. The World Weavers with Heartseeker by the end of the game was doing half of whatever Squishy's HP that BMT targeted, so I think a smart ban there for PK. Hell kind of in kind taken away from Paul on the other side. Continued Nemesis priority, though, Gormizer. 100% pick ban rate. Hovering, middling maybe in the win-loss department. But Nemesis has been through and through maybe the most contested jungle pick so far here in Phase 2.
Yeah, and honestly, it's for good reason. I mean, she can chase you down, slow you down, shield herself to heal up in the event things get dicey, and she's just good against tanks. That's the best thing, I think, right now. I mean, already tanks, I think, are getting hurt pretty badly by some of these carries with all the pin that's available. But, you pull in this Amaterasu, hey, Scary D, guess what? It's going to be a very rough game if Nemesis decides to ult you. The thing that I'm a little more interested in seeing, specifically from the Knights, is whether or not they go for the Cthulhu, being open. They played him twice last week. I think that's something that worked well for them. Well, obviously didn't work well for them because they lost both games, but I think it's something that could fit into their draft if they wanted it.
That's right. Cthulhu banned out all in our previous set, all 2 games there, so didn't get a chance to see him. We had a pretty, I think, good discussion in our pre-SPL show about where he belongs, support, solo, whatever it was. I think he can work both, but maybe the argument is that solo lane a little bit more comfortable for him. Open through the first 6 bans and the first 5 picks here. So the Knights feel comfortable with the Behemoth to lock him in with the 6th overall pick. No, is the answer. It's a Rom instead. Haven't seen Rom all that much, Gormizer, but it is the 100% win rate that the Knights will be putting to the test.
Look, if you were going to tell me cover up all the colors, the logos, the titles, everything, and you just showed me Amaterasu, Hebo, and Rom on a team, that's the Knights, right? I mean, it just fits their MO from top to bottom. It's Scary D, it's Paul, it's Zap. You get one on every single side of the map, or every portion of the map that you're going to have control of, and now you get a little bit of flex pick. You can put Cuvo onto something maybe if you need to flex him. And, he got nerfed, but I think that the Cthulhu could still come in. I think a lot of teams maybe saw how he wasn't necessarily the strongest support, and maybe are a little more timid about trying to pull it out over there. And if your solo laner doesn't want him, then maybe just toss him to the wayside. And it seems like the Knights are kind of just glancing over him. Amaterasu doesn't want to have that matchup against the Wukong or the Kukulkan.
Instead, it's Ymir actually banned out. Khepri is as well. The Sun Wukong and the Kukulkan, as you point out. For the Knights, both banned out. I think if I'm looking, honestly, at the Radiance draft so far up to this point, and I'm assuming it's the Hercules going over to Aurora, but I am thrilled that they've gotten that pick for him. I think one of the big conversations we had in phase number 1 around Aurora is how teams just kind of banned Hercules blindly in the first phase of bans because they know how good Aurora is on that god, so it shifted Aurora onto, these different vibe support picks. So I love this for Aurora, the fact that he's going to get a go at the Hercules here. Oh, again, we're assuming for game number 1 up against the Ganesh that found some good value gore in our previous set.
Yeah, I honestly think that Ganesh is going to make it a little more difficult to just be Hercules. Not in the sense that they're going to be able to find any early kills. The aggression's still on the side of Radiance there. But I think, you get the knock-up and then all of a sudden you're silenced so you can't get your driving strike right afterward, or you're just silenced outright at the beginning. I think Ganesh has a lot of controlling properties that is just going to tell Uller and Hercules to slow down a little bit. And that's where Knights are ideally going to be able to kind of pull the reins away from Radiance, because otherwise Hercules Uller is going to shred anyone and everyone that stands in its way.
Now it is a double hunter for the Knights. Heimdall, Rom, and I believe when we saw this in the SOC today, it was Heimdall in the mid lane. So an interesting draft from the Knights to be sure here, Gormizer. I think Radiance, my thoughts on them, I think they've got exactly what they want. You talk about comfort picks across the board for all of their roles. I think Benji and this Camazot's a great match. Hercules, of course, for Aurora, and then Merlin for BMT in the mid lane. Great for them. What are your thoughts maybe on the Radiance draft, that being said, and what are the Knights bringing to the table for Game 2?
I think Radiance have a lot of consistencies. Again, a lot of things that worked in Phase 1. The Merlin, the Camazots, the Hercules, the Uller, Nemesis, who we've been seeing do well here in Phase 2. I think 5 out of 5, you hit every check mark you want to just feel comfortable as a team. Camazots is going to be great at sustaining himself. Merlin's going to be great at taking sustain away from other people when he gets that Divine Ruin, or a great applicator of that Spear of the Magus to be able to get that passive out there. So I think they've got a good draft that's going to play with each other very well. The Knights, my brain had to take a second to process because I was like, wait a minute, who's jungling? It's the Hebo, I believe, going over there for Cuvo, which it's interesting to see that he's kind of come back in. It was something that was so big for Paul, but with 2 hunters, one of them, in my mind, would typically be Heimdall, maybe going mid. It's going to be a lot of damage, a lot of structure damage, a lot of objective control that can come down from the Knights, but a lot of it is going to hinge on what Hebo can do out of the jungle and what a Matarasu can do. You know, if you can get a Nika performance, then that's going to win you a game just on its own.
Well, it is game number 1 between Radiance and the Knight, and as such, we got Finch and Mifflin on the call.
Thanks, Dolson and Gore. Let's head down to game number 1 indeed. We got Doug, obviously, bringing us the views alongside it, as none of the big stuff you'd be worried about came in here, Miff. No Cthulhu, no Freya, or any other mage ADCs, only 1 Olorin ban, no auto-attack assassins picked or banned here either, except for Nemesis, if you want to call her that. So we're coming in here, Miff, with a relatively traditional sorted comp on both sides.
It is, but for Radiance, my concern is once the 5-on-5 engagement starts, with Camazotz coming out of Soul Lane, Radiance's entire draft is going to be lacking a little bit insofar as confirmable, easy-to-find CC. It's going to be a lot on Aurora to really set up these fights for Radiance, but when you have Aurora on Hercules, I think you're fine putting that on his plate.
You're almost always in a good situation when you have Aurora on that Hercules pick, and he should be able to get plenty aggressive. At Hercules Wheeler lane, that's on-demand pressure, Mifflin, as far as I can tell. Really, the whole composition is they drafted 5 people who can all individually kill you at basically any point. That's going to make life hard for the Knights, because a lot of them I feel like need to come online a little bit more. How do you like the way these drafts are rounding up? And does Radiance just going to run away with it early? Are they in trouble late? How do you see it?
It depends on how the duo lane starts. If Aurora is able to get off to a strong start and then rotate out, the 3v3 for Radiance is going to be so dominant. But Pittsburgh Knights has a lot of strong pieces. Paul in mid on this Heimdall, that's not going to be nearly as easy to kill as maybe a standard mage or even any other of the hunters. The CC immunity on Heimdall's ultimate, the Bifrost to set him up and really just get out of any sticky situation, means that Paul is likely going to be allowed to free farm for the majority of the game. I think if we have anyone on Radiance really trying to target for aggression, PK have to be worried for Cuvo, Fred, and they have to be worried for Zapman. And I think if Radiance spot that out, that might be where they find the dub.
Playing aggressively on the left-hand side, but no fireworks or action happening on this side just yet. We talked about some of the safety that the Knights might have, and maybe that could slow down some of this aggression from the Radiance. They're going to need it, man, because Radiance love to come out of the gates hot, I feel like. If they can get ahead early, they will absolutely take it, especially when Aurora is on an aggressive pick like the Hercules. He's the signature Hercules player to me, even with how good Mike is at it. You just think of Aurora first. So a lot kind of, I think, on his shoulders here to make sure he's carrying this team throughout this early to mid game, because when they get later on, they've got Merlin damage, Nemesis, Camazotz will be unkillable. They're going to be hard to deal with as a 5-man death ball.
Not only a 5-man death ball, but having that Merlin in mid gives them the opportunity to, the second the pressure is established in the duo lane, which should go the way of Radiance with how the draft lines up here. Merlin's going to rotate over towards Gold Fury, instantly blow it up in fire form. They've got decent confirm inside of Aurora's Boulder. Cyclone Spin can use Hail of Arrows and Bladed Arrow at the same time, essentially, to find at least 1,000 damage there. There are plenty of ways that Radiance can get themselves towards these objectives. That said, I really do think PK might have the slight edge in the team fights. Neil Ma and Ganesh, Dharmic Pillars, going to be very hard to deal with for a lot of Radiance's draft. Drop it around Aurora, drop it around Nemesis. Both of those guys are just going to be stuck inside the cage or take pretty massive damage on the way out.
Yeah, I feel like people think of like Khepri Revive as like one of the best anti-dive tools out there, but Ganesh feels like one of the best anti-divers out there. The silence is great for stopping you when you get there from being able to cast the abilities. Obviously, nothing controls space the way that Dharmic Pillars can as well. It's so punishing damage-wise and slow-wise. You're certainly right. They've got a ton of great tools, though. Even I think Atlas of the Yellow River, the Hebo Carpet, it gets undervalued sometimes for how difficult it can be to fight into that when he's immune to slows and slowing you. They do have a lot of sort of counter initiation tools.
Man, I'm still just floored that you knew the ability of Hebo's Carpet. I've been calling it Carpet for the better part of a decade. Which, Atlas of the Yellow River, that's clean, but Zapman, not as clean.
In some trouble, use beats too early, and Aurora finds first blood. Duncan Zapman to get Radiance onto the board here first. But if there's anything we know about Zap, is that if he dies early on in the duo lane, he wins those.
Yeah, that's the Zap passive. He uses his beads there, doesn't get it to survive, and then rolls the wrong direction. Now Neil as well!
Yeah, Aurora is unstoppable on the Hercules pull. This is certainly a death. It's just a matter of time and who they choose to give it to, because there's nowhere Neil Ma can go for safety at this point. Cyclone Spin gets it with the axe, already level 5 on this Uller, and this is a scary way for this game to start.
Yeah, Zapman's got to shoot out the flare, put up the bat signal, get some help in this duo lane. Cyclone Spin and Aurora both finding a kill for under their belts. That's a lane that was already going to win just off of pressure, but now that they've got a lead as well, it's going to be very hard for them to deal with. PK have a couple of avenues to deal with it. They can either decide to completely just ignore this lane now, don't send anyone back, and just hope that Zapman can farm it up easily, or they could try and send some ganks over, maybe get around this over-aggression from Radiance if Radiance decide to try and continue finding kills. But either way, with Cubo Fred on Hebo in the jungle, it's going to be very hard for him to want to really head over to that lane. Hebo's a god that really needs to farm up, so that might be his prerogative. I think PK might just have to give up pressure in duo.
Yeah, if Cubo Fred rotates over and doesn't find a kill, he might be sort of signing his death warrant in terms of keeping up with adapting on this Nemesis, because we know how adapting loves to power farm in the early game and kind of keep his head down and get to that point in the mid to late game where he knows he has that solo kill potential, where he can act, as you like to say, as that solo agent. And again, I know that Zapman rolled the wrong way, but I don't think of it so much as a big misplay, but Cyclone Spin could be in trouble. Neil Ma is here. The silence keeps Cyclone Spin locked down, so Zapman goes up to the air to not give Cyclone Spin a return target leap right into the Dharmic Pillars. The kill gifted over to Zapman, and the Knights are on the board.
Yeah, Cyclone just getting a little bit overzealous with his lead, decides to jump in the 1v1. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't a 1v1, but now Cubo in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, but Nemesis is so reliant on these slows, and Cubo Fred immunes those with the carpet. Boulder finds nothing as it clips the wall, and Cubo Fred, without even using beads or his ultimate, just gets to happily walk away. That's actually, when you consider losing Cyclone Spin and left and then dropping 2 ultimates and getting nothing, not a bad sequence for the Knights there at all.
Yeah, Cubo can count his lucky stars. I'm confident in saying Aurora's not missing another boulder like that, not this game. So that's just one misplay that might have lost out Radiance, just a little bit of pressure there. Cubo makes it out alive, doesn't have to trade any out himself, keeps the beads, keeps the ultimate. His gank potential is there, but because he goes for this more defensive relic in the early game, usually you see these junglers electing to pick up Blink first. Now that he has the beads, sure, he's a little bit more survivable, but ganking the dual lane is going to be a lot harder, finding these opportune moments to get into mid, also going to be very difficult. It tells me that Cubo really is just trying to keep up with adapting and farm and just maintain that level equity.
That's what he'll have to do. You know, I was going to start talking about how I don't know that trying to gank the Hebo when he has the carpet up is really the best idea. Nemesis is so reliant on the slows, and then obviously the Hebo able to get away from them using that carpet. How do you like the call there for that ultimate there? Most times, do they get that kill onto Cubo, you think? It's just a little bit off?
I think the pull not really getting Hebo around the corner was a huge determining factor there. The boulder not landing, that boulder would have taken out at least 30, maybe 40% of Hebo's health. So it's definitely a calculated risk. Sure, you run the risk that Hebo might have just been able to ult away no matter what, but trading out Nemesis ult in the early game for a Hebo ultimate is likely going to be worth, just because Hebo is a lot more impactful at this phase of the match.
I like that idea. Didn't quite work out there, but Neil Ma has been pushed back towards the sky, and Divine Judgment means an easy kill for Radiance to come out on the back of it. What can Cubo Fred do now? Only watch from afar, as there's really nowhere to help. Blue buff will be invaded as well. Radiance are pulling the trigger quickly, is what I've noticed. I know they didn't get that kill onto Cubo Fred earlier, but I'm seeing a willingness to just go for it if they catch you out in the jungle.
It's just such a low commitment. If Adapting does decide to throw out that ultimate, no matter what, if he thinks it's going to turn into a bad fight, well, he threw it out from a range, you could just give up and go back to farming. If it turns into a good fight, well, you pick yourself up a kill. And that's one of the strengths of Nemesis. She's a very low committal god until she really decides to use that dash. So Adapting can just continue doing what he's been doing, which is setting up for the rest of his team. Even in the fights where Adapting has found his assists or he's found these ultimates, he's not really the one who's getting the kill himself. He's not doing the majority of the damage. He's just facilitating the team and then immediately falling back to farming. Radiance has established a pretty sizable lead 8 minutes in at 2,000 gold, and they can continue to push it. With this pace as well, we already have Benji with a 1-level lead. This Kamazatz is going to have his power spike so much earlier than Amaterasu. If Radiance decide to, they can group up around Gold Fury, group up around mid, and continue forcing fights.
I wouldn't be surprised surprised if it's a Soul Eater next for Benji. We've seen that item be very popular on these sustain-based solo laners and assassins later, so I feel like Camazotz could potentially be a good candidate. And you talked about how Nemesis feels kind of like low committal, but she also feels like one of those gods that it feels bad to commit on. Like one of those, she always has the shield, she has the dash, it feels like she can always get away or slow you. So there's kind of a lot, I think, that allows her adapting to just kind of take these skirmishes, see how they go, and then if it ends up not going their way, he can usually just leave.
And that's really is the strategy. But I think Radiance do have the onus of having to control the early game. They have to be worried about this Heimdall scaling to late. The double Hunter comp is going to be very strong come late. Scary D, once he's allowed to rotate out of that lane, is going to be one of the best initiators on the map, if not the best initiator on the map, maybe barring Hercules. But even then, the PK roster is going to scale so well into the late game that I think Radiance has made this calculated decision to set this very quick early game pace, but it's whether or not they can continue to push this lead. Right now, this 2,000 gold lead isn't going to be enough to propel them into the mid game. It's going to come down to Gold Fury or something along those lines to really be the first differentiating factor between these two teams.
I love this. Heavy commit to right for the blue buff invade, so the Knights come over to Gold Fury, even committing the Dharmic Pillars. Hail of Arrow is the best way Cyclone Spin can contest, but he isn't able to steal it away. The Knights get the Gold Fury, but Cyclone Spin can get the kill, takes care of Zapman. They never try to collapse onto him because the rotation's on the way. Adapting is coming in too, and Cyclone Spin knew it. They used the ultimate, almost gets the kill onto Nil Ma, but he's able to make it out of there. But Radiance, even when the Knights take the Gold Fury, seem to be the ones in control of the map.
But PK claw back a lot of the lead there. That gold deficit's been cut to just below 1,000. Even then, now Radiance can't do anything for until Gold Fury respawns in about 4.5 minutes. They don't really have any avenue to expand their lead, so they just have to return back to farming. I think PK did a very good job there. They immediately recognized, well, Radiance has been going to our blue buff on respawn. We know there's going to be at least 3 members over there. Let's take the risky play. Radiance in return, looking at the Pyromancer.
Scary D is nearby, Neoma on his way as well to throw some damage over the wall, so it's dropped. And it's not nothing, right? Radiance get the blue buff, they invade red buff on the back of it, Cyclone Spin gets the kill into Zapman, so yes, the Knights get the gold as Radiance are in right, but they certainly traded it out as Pyromancer re-pulled by the Knights able to secure it, so that's 2 of the big neutral objectives going to the Chaos Squad, but Neoma has his dash caught out by Benji, goes into the Bat of the Hell with some damage coming courtesy of BMT, and that's 1 more kill for Radiance.
PK is looking very disjointed on these disengages. Usually you want someone at least walking out with you. Walk out in pairs, get your bubble buddy so you can get at least a little bit of safety on the way out. But instead, Neoma left high and dry, does sacrifice his life, but being the support, I'm sure everyone's fine with that. Trading a support for an objective is almost always going to be a dub. Neil is falling slightly behind on the Hercules, but that's to be expected. This warrior support should be pulling ahead just because he's soaking up more farm, looking to be aggressive in the early game, whereas Ganesh, the second Dharmic Pillars are available to him. He's just about hit his power spikes, and now he can just play this more facilitator role, whereas Aurora has to continually activate himself as this secondary jungler and continue looking for pressure, looking for opportunities to set up the rest of Radiance to move and push this lead even further.
Wow, all 5 of the kills for Radiance are on the duo lane of the Knights. Neil with 3 death and Zap with 2. That isn't to say that's the only place they put pressure. There's been repeated blue buff invades, so that's part of the reason Scary D is behind. There have been some red buff invades as well to try and help teams get ahead of Paul in the middle lane. These kills may have been sort of sequestered over to the duo lane, for lack of a better word, but they have still been getting pressure across the map, have Radiance. It's just they have to make sure they're controlling these neutral objectives. If you're giving up Gold Fury and Pyro, it's going to be hard to build a lead.
That's tough. Zapman loses out on his beads in exchange for Ullr's axe. There really wasn't much kill potential there. He must have been worried about maybe the rotation from Aurora or even adapting, hovering around to the jungle. But now that safety that he has, it's no longer there. He's only got Shell available to him. He's decided to go for that Shell build to block out a lot of the auto attacks coming from Radiance. Nemesis and Cyclone Spin on this Ullr are going to be a little bit less effective, but without Aegis, he's going to be a lot more susceptible to gods like Merlin. He's going to be susceptible to Camazotz. And with no beads, the only thing that's going to be able to buy time for his team to rotate in if he is in any trouble is that ultimate.
He is in trouble, but I think Radiance have put that fear into him. They have been roaming around the map in pairs, blowing people up quickly with heavy commits, so Zapman didn't want to risk it. and ends up using those beads. I do think, though, Myth, we have a good chance to talk about some of the differences in the builds. Adapting not going Golden Blade, which I feel like has been very popular even for the Nemesis. Instead, he's going with the Brawler's Beat Stick into Erendite start. We can also talk a little bit about these Hunter builds. We're seeing a little bit more there as well. So are you surprised at all, I guess, with the Nemesis that there's no Golden?
I think with the recent Golden Blade nerfs, there's not really that much of a trade-off in value. Instead, now you can go for the Brawler's Beat Stick, which is going to be more damage overall than Golden Blade would have been even pre-nerf. And going to Erendite, he's going to get some of that cooldown online, he's going to get some movement speed once he channels that ultimate. Erendite is just about as close to core as any item is, especially for Nemesis. When you're so reliant on your slows, you might as well make yourself at least a little bit faster. I like it as well, it's just going to be a huge power spike for Nemesis. That's 75 power, 10% cooldown, it's just about every stat you could need out of the jungle. I am surprised to see Erendite coming this early on in the build. I'd have expected to see maybe even a Jotun's Wrath or even a Crusher, something along those lines, but instead it seems like Adapting is trying to hit his power spike as quickly as possible, likely in response to the state of the game. Now that Radiance is ahead a little bit, Adapting knows, well, we're going to be fighting the second this Oni Fury respawns.
One of the items it feels the worst to build, I'd say, Erendite. Chilling on the tier 1 for I think about 900 never feels great, and it's expensive to get all the way up there, so getting it out of the way early doesn't feel bad. Maybe that's the idea from Adapting, is the Fury is on the way to spawning soon. The Knights will control the neutral vision, though. They've taken care of the oracles, so they shall see all that happens around the Fury, but they don't need the extra vision. They're here themselves starting it up. But Aurora shows some presence. That's enough to get the Knights to back off for now. But as you said, Myth, I expect that next Oni Fury fight to be a critical one in terms of how the next few minutes of the game are going to play out afterwards.
It's very likely whoever picks up the Oni Fury is also likely to win the fight afterward. Pyromancer spawning very soon after that means that whoever gets this objective right here is likely going to establish a very large lead, not only in map pressure, but in gold and experience. So neither team should be willing to back down on it. With the deficit as it is, neither team should really feel too dangerous moving in. It's a pretty even fight as far as I'm concerned, but my eyes are still on Cuvo Fred. We haven't seen much from the Hebois yet, but he's going to have a very good matchup into Cyclone Spin. He can shut down BMT. The only one he really has to be wary of is Adapting. If he ults into that third ability from Nemesis, you're just getting zero value and healing out the enemy jungler. Cuvo, also ticking over to level 13, decides to go more defensive in the relics and still doesn't have a blink.
Paul able to narrowly evade danger with the Bifrost. Aurora and Cyclone Spin put some good damage into Cuvo Fred. And if they know that Paul and Cuvo have to back, this is a great time to start up the Fury. That's exactly what they're doing, Myth. They're pulling it now, knowing that a lot of the backline's low. Even if Paul and Cuvo come in, they're lower. Zatman takes the sky, though. The snipe might be enough to steal it away. They reset the objective. The Knights, though, are the ones that take the Oni Fury. But what about the fight on the backside? Pittsburgh Knights are running for the hills. They do not want this fight anymore. Paul knows he has the Bifrost to reposition, but waiting for him was Benji. Now he's in trouble underneath the tier 1, and Aurora can blink past and come underneath for the kill. That is Paul taken care of, but one life for the Oni Fury. Myth, that seems pretty worth.
It is pretty worth, but it's what Radiance do with this time. While Paul's dead, they can immediately move into the Pyromancer. They can likely push out these Oni minion waves before PK is able to make any value out of it. They take down the mid tower. Pyromancer is going to die. They can likely take down the solo tower as well. PK do confirm the objective off of Dharmic Pillars. It was just left there ticking away while no one was really looking at it. That's clean play, but they're not even going to get the Pyromancer. It's so low, PK are going to get it for free.
Yeah, this objective control has been the problem, hasn't it, Myth? I mean, that's two Furies that really Radiance could have been able to get. The first one was taken while they had presence and right. That makes some sense. The second one, they were ahead. They even got Paul and Cuvo low, so they had the favorable position in the fight, and they haven't been able to control either of the Pyromancers either. They gotta clean that up, because just the kills and the buff invades are not gonna get them there alone.
Yeah, 6-1 is the slash line, but the gold deficit's still only 1,000 in favor of Radiance. 18 minutes into the game, that's just about nothing. Now the only thing I'm really concerned about is the XP differential. Scary D is a couple levels down on Benji. The mid laner's got a slight deficit there as well in favor of BMT. They could still use these levels to push out their lead, but even then, this isn't the best position Radiance has been in. I'd say this is likely the best position PK's been in since an even game state.
It's tough. I know how strong this composition is, but I wonder if they're lacking a bit for Confirm. I mean, that's the only one they lost in a big contested sort of coin flip. That Gold Fury, the Pyromancers, and the other Fury were taken in response to Radiance having pressure elsewhere on the map. So it's not so much their confirmation, to sort of correct myself mid-sentence. It's more that I feel like they're not quite getting enough with these trades. I know they want to get pressure elsewhere, but they're still giving up the objectives. As Dharmic Pillars isolates Aurora on the top side of this fight, Paul uses his ultimate to isolate him even further, but Adapting is here to provide some backup, so the Knights still have to retreat. Meanwhile, Cupo Fred using Crushing Wave gets no damage onto Adapting. The boulder a little bit off the mark, and Cupo barely able to escape.
Cuvo makes it out, but that's when you get the value from the Aegis. Had that boulder made its home, Cuvo had already pre-Aegis and make sure he makes it out of that situation alive, but now Hebo no longer has beads, Aegis, or his ultimate available, and this late in the game, nearly 20 minutes, if Radiance want to, they can use this time to move in towards the Fire Giant. I really, really like Cyclone Spit's build here. Goes into the Crusher, which is very standard for the Uller, but immediately moves into the Fail Not afterward, get himself a little bit of crit, a little bit more penetration. That's going to gel really well with his ability Hunter playstyle, but at the same time, he's not making any sacrifices to his auto attacks.
You're feeling good, I feel like, if you're Cyclone Spin here at this point, man. He is ready to rock and roll. And I wanted to talk about the Hunter builds earlier, too. You can see Zapman going of the Atalanta's bow into crit. He's got the Rage right behind the Atalantas. We might still see Fail Not from him. It's good enough that it can go into the auto attack build or the ability-based build right now. The percent pen, the passive, all good enough that it can fit into just about any Hunter build myth.
It looks like that might be a Heartseeker coming out from Cyclone Spin. This man is looking to blow people up as quickly as anyone ever has before. He's playing essentially another assassin, but this time with a range. Radiance going ahead and put some pressure on the right side of the map. No one on the side of PK is able to respond to it, and we're starting to see a slow chokehold on the map.
Radiance do have map control. They have gotten this tower, but as you pointed out, they're not so far in the lead that the Knights can't fight into it. They have to be careful about not overstepping on trying to force down this tier 2 tower. In fact, they do end up relenting. I understand that Radiance are the ones sort of deciding where the fights happen, but they really have not created a whole lot of space for themselves. They got the tier 1s, though, which makes it harder for the Knights to run if they fight around FG or something like that, but Radiance don't have that big of a lead.
They don't, but Cuvo still doesn't have his actives available, and you know Radiance is cognizant of that fact, which is why they're positioning so aggressively on the map. They know that Hebo can't come in safely, and having no sort of defensive abilities out of their Guardian, they don't have a Geb, they don't have a Kepri. It means that if Hebo does look for the Crushing Wave at any point, it's likely going to cost him his life in response, and there's so many threats on the side of Radiance that even losing one member might be a value trade for them.
This has been an excellently played game, though, by both teams so far. Same as we saw from the Sanguine set against Space Station earlier on in the day. The level of competition, I feel like, here at the SPL really has increased. And just as I say that, the Knights are starting up the Fire Giant. They use the Frenzy as well. This is a full commit. Boulder has come out already from the war. He's trying to lock down Paul. The Knights secure the objective. They will claim Cubo Fred's life on the backside of it, though, but the Knights just walk up to the Fire Giant and take it. Radiance have not been able to compete in terms of objective control at all this game.
They haven't. That's been afforded to the Knights from the Dharmic Pillars for that burn potential. Cubo Fred uses his ultimate for the confirmation. Scary D's passive is going to make every objective even easier to kill, but still, they've been trading out members every single step of the way. Every time the Knights pick up a Gold Fury, a Pyromancer, the Fire Giant, they're trading out at least one member, which is why Radiance is able to maintain this lead. But now with 4 members strong with Fire Giant, when Pepwald responds, he's going to have his Aegis available to him and his ultimate. PK can start to push down these towers, and with the map state as it is, just taking out the tier 1s, a couple tier 2s will completely even out this match.
The Knights have always been, Mifflin, a team I feel like that's unafraid to play a little PvE. It kind of feels like how I would describe it. They come in, they take the Gold Fury, and they are gone. They are leaving. They're not looking to scrap on the back of it at all. They want to go. Same with the Fire Giant. They get the Fire Giant, and they are out of there. They'll also fall back and defend Phoenixes quicker than anyone else in the league. The Knights are unafraid to play a little bit differently, I think, than everyone else, but in a way that is pretty likely to get them the win.
It is, and now that they're in that siege phase of the game, this double Hunter comp is really going to come to fruition. If at any point a minion touches a tower on the side of Radiance, 2 Hunters, yeah, your tower is not going to exist for very long, which is why we're seeing Radiance put up a very soft defense in this Tier 1.
Not gonna full commit trying to keep this Tier 1 alive, but hey, if you step forward, Aurora will certainly take a pull. Not able to find it that time. A good silence from Neil stopped him from getting the most optimal pull he would have liked. Tier 1 tower down, and the Knights are washing their hands of it. They do not want to fight. They're using this Ganesh in particular to cleanly disengage, but maybe now they do want the fight. Neil Ma charging in, looking to lock down Benji. Not able to do it there. Instead, they get pulled in. Why choose the fight? It had been working so well when you were running. Neil Ma instead has his life taken out. Adapting, steps in, slice and dice on 2, avoids the crushing wave, and the Knights are fully on the back foot.
Radiance can continue to push forward. They've got the TKO on Cuvo. He has to back here, which means Tier 2 tower likely goes the way of Radiance. And with 30 seconds left on Neilma, they might even be able to push in towards that Phoenix because no one on the side of PK is really backing.
They are. They're sticking around at least a bit, but Radiance are not going to continue to push forward. They'll take the Tier 2 and start to fall back. This game is on a tightrope. If the Knights choose to heavily commit, then Radiance are going to win the fight, but it looks like in these more smaller engagements where it's all about who disengages more cleanly and objective play, that's favoring the Knights right now. It feels like if Radiance are trying to hold the Knights down and force them to fight, but PK won't do it.
I mean, it's working out so far in favor of Radiance every single step of the way. If PK, the one time we saw them actually choose to take an engagement, Aurora smashed them into the rocks with a double pull punch combo to set up the easy picks, and now the map has been blown wide open. There's only one Tier 2 tower left for PK. One lost engagement where PK loses out on 2, maybe 3 members could very easily result in the game. That Fire Giant power play that we were expecting from PK never happened. They only got a Tier 1 tower, and that's it. And Fire Giant's going to be respawning in about a minute and a half. Radiance is going to have the huge advantage going into it. They should be able to get the ward advantage as well. These team fights have been going Radiance's way since minute 1.
They really have been, and I think it's disappointing for Knights. They couldn't get more out of that Fire Giant buff because I don't know how many more times Radiance was going to let it go without really being there. They got there towards the end, but it wasn't in time, and they definitely were not going to out-confirm the Knights. Benji is silenced. There's a lot of the Knights here if they want to look to commit, but Benji able to reposition. Aurora blinking in, looking to see what he can find here. Hash the Shield of Regrowth when he pops that mitigate wounds, but this fight is done. We're going to see a long battle, I think, around this next Fire Giant in 50 seconds when it's back.
Yeah, it's going to be a very long dance. So far, both teams are looking hesitant to go for the all-in engagement. It's not really favoring either team too much right now. Only 4,000 gold in favor of Radiance at the 25-minute mark. Still just about nothing. Almost everyone in the game is starting to work on their 6th item or already have it complete. Whereas PK, now they can start to look a little bit more aggressive. I think that it's been a very quiet game from Cuvo Fred. He hasn't really done that much damage. 4,000 in 26 minutes. But one good ultimate, one good 3-1 combo from this Hibois is going to immediately turn that board upside down. But it's whether or not they can find the priority targets. So far, in every single one of these engagements, Cyclone Spin has been allowed to free cast from a range because Benji's been doing such a good job locking down the backline. Aurora's been playing this disruptor in his own backline. He hasn't really been looking for the true engagement himself. It's almost all been Benji, while Adapting has been acting as a solo agent just on the edge of the fight, coming in, finding damage or a pick or whatever he can do, and then immediately disengaging himself.
Oh, look at this Nemean pickup from Paul, 5th item. That has got to be to try and help him out up against Adapting in particular. Those block stacks could potentially be huge. I know that if you're Heimdall, you kind of want him building towards that damage. Do you like the Nemean pickup here?
I do like Nemean, especially paired with the 3 shells on the side of PK. Good luck to Adapting finding anyone to assassinate in the backline. And even if he does decide to go on someone who doesn't have a shell, it's going to be a Hibois, knock up into the ultimate, or even just pop your own Aegis to deal with a lot of the damage. Lifesteal on this Hivo means that if he does take some damage, you can back up to back camps and heal up. But it's going to be Radiance first in the scene, the Fire Giant.
It's already down below half. Aurora and Benji on zone duty. Fire Giant dropped for now, as Radiant step out to provide a little bit of damage. They're letting the Fire Giant heal back up. Now they're pulling it again. The Knights circling around the outside. All the relics available for both squads. All ultimates as well too, so it should be a fairly even fight. But again, Radiance dropped the Fire Giant. They're trying to bait the Knights in.
It seems like it's just the most intense game of chicken. It's a dare. Whoever pulls Fire Giant first is going to have the disadvantage in the engagement, but Radiance has the lead right now. You can't expect PK to be the first ones on the scene. They have to set up this defensive wall. Maybe Aurora moves forward, creates a little bit of space, and then Radiance can look to burn the objective as easily as they want, but Zapman has that constant threat of a steal with the Astral Arrows. Immediately, if Neilma moves up with a Dharmic Pillar, it's going to make it a no-play zone inside that Fire Giant pit. PK aren't going to make it easy for Radiance.
Yeah, doing Fire Giant with a small lead is about the hardest thing in the game. The only thing harder is going to happen in a minute 30 when it's enhanced and things get even more challenging. Now, it is worth noting, Primal Fury's over there on the left-hand side. When you pick that up, you're doing more damage and taking less damage from the Fire Giant. So if things really do stall out, look to one of these teams to maybe send one member over there to get that Primal and try and get an edge when they're doing FG.
It might be PK that sends someone over. As soon as you say it, you speak it into existence, Finch, and Paul starts to motion his way over there. But that's one of the benefits of having Double Hunter. Either one of these guys, Paul or Zapman, could rotate towards the gold tree and immediately look to blow it up. But the second they move away from the Fire Giant, Radiance are right back on it.
Radiance trying to force the Pittsburgh Knights to step into a bad fight. But the Knights are, I think, the most patient team in the league, man. They are not going to overstep if they don't like their chances. And that's why they're staying right in that range where Radiance can't do the FG, and they also can't commit to trying to take a fight. Now Neil and Scary D starting to step forward, trying to claim some real estate, pulling the Pyromancer in. But Radiance are right here. They're certainly not going to let it go down for free. Pyro down to half. Aurora lurking around the backside of this fight. The Knights able to grab the Pyromancer itself, so that's why Radiance bring the trap, pull Scary D back in towards the squad. But the Knights are out of there, man. They get the objectives and leave.
That was a pretty large commitment from Neil, though, losing out of 50% of his health, and Radiance are absolutely aware of the fact they're going to immediately move in and blow up the Fire Giant.
But Aurora has been isolated. Big Man Ting's low as well as Scary D steps in with a dazzling offensive, but they're not able to get the kill. Cyclone Spin shuts down Scary. Aurora is still alive and can look to sustain off mitigate wounds. That's why Zapman went to the sky with the snipes. He wanted BMT in the back, but could not find the accuracy. Benji, though, still A-OK, able to regroup back with the rest of Radiance near FG. What a tightrope walk this fight is, but Scary D, the only one that falls.
PK just get a little bit overzealous again on that Pyromancer. It's not even that valuable at this point in the game with everyone this far into their build. Sure, that additional mobility when you're rotating on a base is going to be very useful when you're in these elongated Fire Giant dances, but trading out that much of Neilma's health immediately gave Radiance the go-ahead to move in, force the objective, force another fight, and just knowing that anyone that steps up really isn't going to have the backing of Ganesh because Ganesh is in the most vulnerable position on the side of PK. But even that said, 4 members strong on PK, Radiance still aren't guaranteed this fire.
Not at all. It's certainly still risky. It'd be risky to leave and try and go to Primal Fury as well. It's just difficult in this spot when you're the team with a small advantage. But Fire Giant low. Frenzy has been popped. Pittsburgh Knights take the FG. Radiance couldn't secure it. And yet again, like bandits in the night, the Knights steal away an objective. Zapman cuts down Aurora. They pop their own Frenzy as they frantically search the jungle for someone else to fight, someone else to finally punish for not taking the objective properly. They recognize Benji's isolated in the back. A collapse could certainly be in the cards as Radiance misstep yet again.
But Adapting is going to try and take out that left side Phoenix, but Zapman, been playing this game for a very long time, knows immediately what he's looking for and rotates over. That said, look at Benji, still out of position. Scary D's on the chase. Paul uses his ultimate to close distance. Not quite enough. Like, looks like he's looking for the Galahorn slow. It does connect, but Benji should be able to get out of there alive.
If he's got the lead, Neilma closes the gap with the silence. No teammates can get there in time. Good action, Cyclone Spin. But Scary D dashes in, dazzling offensive to lock him down, but still has that leap, so able to reposition. Meanwhile, Adapting and Zapman still hanging out on the left-hand side of the map, but Adapting doesn't win those. Zapman been playing for a long time, able to find one more kill on the left side, but what about in right? The Pittsburgh Knights been waiting patiently all game long. 4 Fire Giant buffs strong on the right-hand side. They don't have Zapman, but they've got 2 Hunters as Aurora moves in for the pull, but a great silence from Neil stops it all, but Big Man Tings has the damage. That stops everything in its tracks. Cyclone Spin wants to jump in, but the Knights are better at disengaging than just about anyone, and they're on the way out.
The best at running, but Paul's been left all on his lonesome, and the chase is on. Benji, bad out of health. He's still
trying to close the gap. But Paul has some help there to keep him alive. Benji cannot keep up the chase. So the Knights had momentum. We're trying to find that right side. Phoenix couldn't get there. Zapman, though, in the end, gets the tier 2 tower in left. And every tower you take at this point is relevant. It lowers the eventual kill threshold on the Titan. It makes it easier to have multiple avenues towards Phoenixes. The Knights are absolutely still in this. I mean, look at the gold. After everything that's happened across 33 minutes, we're basically tied here, Mim.
This has been the lowest combat, highest stakes game I think I've ever seen. I've been on the edge of my seat the entire time because that's the thin margins both teams are playing with. One mistake loses you out on Fire Giant. One misplay, you lose adapting, you lose your tier 2 tower in response. And now Fire Giant still for a couple more minutes on the side of PK, they can look to at least take down this tier 2 mid tower.
Things are now starting to get scary for Radiance. We talked about how great their comp is at death balling, but what about in the base defense, Myth? I feel like if you have Merlin on your team, you're never feeling too bad, but they are a bit control light in terms of preventing the dive or the engage.
It's really on Aurora again. If he finds a full punch combo, they should instantly be able to blow up at least one target. Outside of that, BMT's job is to keep minion waves out and hurt anyone that Aurora CCs. Cyclone Spin should be looking for poke the entirety of the time, but Adapting and Benji in particular are going to have a hard time finding value on these picks on the siege defense. It's very one-trick. Benji jumps in, looks for the damage. Well, all 5 members of PK should be grouped up together. It's going to be very hard for you to find that one person straggling about, especially when they have Fire Giant on all 5 members.
And this is why the Knights are so willing to be patient, because they know that this is their reward waiting at the end. Now they're the ones with Fire Giant and a chance to potentially burn down a left Phoenix. Tier 2 tower still stands in mid. Perhaps a target they could also consider, but they really want this Phoenix. Dharmic Killer locks in Cyclone Spin. Neo Ma is the first one in. Silence on Aurora to prevent the follow-through, but Boulder hits Zapman for a ton in the pack line. The Knights are now running for their lives, but Benji's here with a bat of the hell to try and clean up some kills, waiting on where the low HP target will land. Good ultimate, though, from Paul. Buys him some time. In fact, locks down Aurora in the backline. It's the Knights that come away with the first kill of this engagement.
Cyclone Spin played that engagement incredibly impressively, just raining arrows on everyone that steps into his range. The Heartseeker getting huge value, the poke potential is there, and it forces PK to disengage a bit, even though they were able to take one pick inside of Aurora for relatively free. Every single ultimate had to be used just about except for Cuvo, and now they have to back up, getting ready for another Fire Giant dance. One Phoenix does fall. They take that left side, which is the hardest one to defend once the Fire Giant respawns. And it's already been pushed up pretty far. PK are going to have to contend with fire minion waves the entirety of the time. This elongated Fire Giant dance, we might not get to see it again just because PK has such an advantageous positioning around it.
13 kills in 36 minutes, but there has been action throughout this one, Mifflin. The Knights' play style now starting to pay off for them in the late game. Radiance are really struggling to find pay dirt, man. We saw it happening when they really started to stall out around the FG, around the 23-minute mark, where the Knights were able to just walk up and take it when it got stolen out from underneath Radiance. They had their opportunities to win as an early game death ball. Now they have to find a way to stay alive up against the late game powerhouse with fire minions pouring down left. The Knights now pulling the Fire Giant and daring Radiance to step in and try and stop them. They drop it instead and look for the Pyromancer. All of Radiance is here. No one defending the base. They want to be here for this fight.
The longer the fight goes on, the more it favors PK. Radiance have to make a hard decision. Back up and defend your base, or make a full-on commitment right now and try and defend the Fire Giant. I think they might have to. There's now 2 entire Fire Minion Waves in there, and now we see Benji has to back. He does have teleport, but now PK know it's going to be a 5-on-4 engagement for at least a couple seconds. The Titans drop to about 80% health. PK could just continue sitting here. Benji can't stay in that lane forever, and the second that they say that him pushing up that left side, I imagine PK is just going to immediately start to barrel down and try and take the 5v4.
Multiple members on Radiance taking their backs now. Want to get back to the base. Push out a bit and start resetting here, Mifflin, because the Knights have also reset. They're not constantly threatening the Fire Giant right now, but the Knights are stepping out, grabbing the red buff, looking around to the jungle to find what farm they can. I think they've sort of recognized they're at this point in the game now, Miff, where they're the ones in control. They want to take fight here.
And they might just be able to find it. It seems like Benji doesn't have any idea that there are 2 members, now 3 members looking for him in the enemy jungle. But Radiance did just spot them out. Now they know they have the positioning advantage around the Fire Giant itself. They could look to move up and get some wards, but PK just kind of positioning as this 3-man roaming death ball with these 2 hyper carries in the late game. Zapman and Cuvo together might just be able to win a fight on their own.
They still have to worry about those fire minions in left. Left side Phoenix almost respawning, and it could go down. Aurora has blinked in, pulled in Cuvo Fred, but silenced to prevent the follow through. There's the push, but caught out. But so is Paul. He takes a ton of damage from big man Tings at the back line, and so Benji gets back there to clean it up. Adapting falls as well elsewhere in the fight. Mid laner traded out for jungler. Now Benji and Aurora are stuck on an island. They need help, but Cyclone Spin and Tings can't make their way to them. Benji ends up falling. Cuvo Fred narrowly still alive, being saved by his team. Aurora uses the boulder to flatten him, but Zapman gets the double. Cyclone Spin and Benji have both fallen. The Knights, with a 3-for-2 fight, are the ones in control. And look at the Titan minions are pouring in. It's well below half. The PK Knights are in a great spot to close this one out.
But there's only 3 members left, and that left side Phoenix is going to be respawning very soon. Scary D's forced it back, and Zapman's just about himself. Aurora might be able to slow him down just enough. Scary D forced to use his teleport to get back into this engagement, but Neil falling low.
And is in some trouble. It's so difficult for the Knights to figure out how to move in now. They really want to try and grab this left side Phoenix before it has a chance to start healing back up, before the Titan has a chance to start healing back up. But BMT and Aurora are here. The Knights had too many casualties to force the fight here the way they wanted to, so they have to retreat.
They do, and now the Fire Giant dance might come back in full swing. That's the last Fire Minion wave that Radiance have to be concerned about on the left side of the map. Fire Giant largely uncontested right now. Both teams are going to be respawning around the same time with a slight advantage to PK. These fights are a little bit disjointed. It seems like there was 2 separate engagements. There was the one with Aurora versus Zapman, and then we saw Cyclone Spin trying to contend with Cuvo Fred on the left side of the right side jungle. If Radiance want to win these engagements, they're going to have to play it incredibly well because they only really have one true initiator on their side, inside of Aurora. They have to be playing around this Hercules, waiting for him to set them up to find the damage, whereas PK, they've got plenty of CC everywhere. Neil Ma can lock someone down. Paul can get huge value out of his ultimate. Scary D is able to peel the backline, find engagement stuns with a dazzling offensive. I think PK's draft might just be better at this phase of the game.
It is, and the problem is Neil Ma, they want to be around Aurora, but they can't. Neil Ma dissects the team fights and separates these members out with those Dharmic pillars. Fire Giant was started by Radiance, but they have to drop it quickly. The Knights show up and defend well, but we're back much closer to parity now. The left side Phoenix is back up. Radiance don't have to worry about fire minions in that wave pushing on their own. They can be here to defend, as that man tried to go grab Oni Fury on his own.
He did, but the second that Radiance started to rotate into the middle of the map, PK called out and Zapman decides that it's not worth the risk. But the entirety of PK moving with them means that the goalpost is moving a little bit. Now it's not a Fire Giant dance, it's a dance around this Oni Fury. Zapman can't feel confident looking for it if Cyclone Spin's hovering, just as Cyclone's going to have way more confirmed potential. Now that he's also got the vision, there's that no way PK can sneak it.
But this could be a big battle right in the middle of everyone is Aurora, but he finds nothing with the pull, so Scary D drops the dazzling offensive, countered by the boulder as the frenzy's popped by PK. They want this fight now. Zapman puts out some damage onto the backline with his ultimate, but it isn't enough. They start to head, though, towards the Fire Giant. They feel like they've lowered the health pools of Radiance enough to where now they can step forward to pull it. And Cyclone Spin still trying to heal up off the speed buff. He needs to be here for this fight as the Knights start to pull it, but they drop the objective. They recognize Benji's alone in mid lane. They force his ultimate all by themselves. It's such a tightrope at this point, Mifflin.
It really is. Every single small mistake, the longer this game goes on, is going to build up. Zapman's pretty close to He can't stick around much longer.
It all gets amplified so much by the stakes that are built up in this game. We're 42 minutes into this contest, and still there is no clear winner. The Knights, I think, have the edge in the team fight, but Radiance have the edge in pick potential. PK has to stay grouped up, or there's no chance they can win against 2 or 3 members of Radiance on their own.
They really can't, but they've been grouping up so incredibly well. Of the 42 minutes we've been in this game, over 20 of them have been just walking around the Fire Giant, hovering around it. The vision falls off. Radiance, Cyclone jumping in?
Yeah, I think they might know that they're in the 5v4. The Knights had Zapman on the Oni Fury, so they're trying to force the fight now. Neo Ma does end up getting isolated, and Radiance come right back towards the FG, but Cubo Fred knows Paul's in the way, so is Scary D. This will not be for free, but it will be critical. Fire Giant dropped. They want the collapse of the Cubo. Frenzy popped as well. Benji cuts up the escape. Crushing Wave finds no value, and Cubo Fred gets popped. That means Radiance have the numbers advantage. They come right back towards the Fire Giant. PK can't afford to step in.
45 seconds left on Neil, a whole minute left on Cuvo, no towers left for the side of PK, means that this Fire Giant could very well lead to the game, and it seems like they know it. They're not going to take the more valuable Phoenix on the left side. They want to get to the enemy team's base as quickly as possible. Push down the right, look for the end. They've got a lot of time to work with, but not enough to take it leisurely. They have to move as quickly as they can. The defense that's left from PK, Amaterasu, Heimdall, and this Ram, it's a lot of damage, but they're going to have a hard time controlling space.
They need Neo Ma when it comes to control, but he's just not here. Aurora steps forward, forces everyone out. Right side Phoenix has dropped, but Radiance will not overstep here. They won't get greedy. They take the right side Phoenix, come right back into the jungle, fully disengaging. They've got plenty of time to reset now and look for a much more normal 5-on-5. We really haven't even gotten to see Radiance try to siege here yet, Myth, but this might be their best opportunity.
And their siege is much stronger than their defense. Aurora now is going to have an entire team behind him as he spearheads their engagement, looks for the pull punch. If he misses, reset, try again. It's afforded to him because the game simplifies when it's on these 5-on-5 engagements on these Phoenixes. Adapting still going to have a very hard time finding value, especially considering that the entirety of PK is likely going to be playing behind their Phoenix, inside their base, wherever they need to be to not be inside danger. And PK's defense is nothing to sneeze at. Ganesh is going to absolutely control space perfectly. Dharmic Pillar is going to be very hard to contend with when you're trying to move into these objectives. Scary D with a dazzling offensive. Huge cone team fight ability when all 5 members are standing in front of you. That's pretty good. Cubo's going to have a much easier time finding multi-man ultimates as well. The defense from PK is strong, but Radiance are coming in with an advantage with that right side Phoenix fell already. Now PK are going to contend with Firemen in ways on the opposite side of the map.
This is a huge time of the game for Radiance. I didn't think they were going to get this kind of opportunity again with how much the Knights seem to be in control of the game with their superior late-game team fight with this Ganesh, with all this burst damage coming out from Cubo, Paul, and Zapman. But they are ready now on the side of Radiance to try and make this fight happen. They're pushing up and left, as you mentioned. All the way over in right, Scary D is pushing out those fire minions so they don't have nearly as many of them to worry about once the siege starts. But Radiance aren't going to wait much longer. They're pushing in, and you can tell the Knights are aware of it. They're starting to back and get into position to defend.
It looks like it's going to be a 4-1 split with Benji in mid. That's about the best option you can look for. No one on the side of PK is really going to win the 1v1 against Benji. He should be able to survive and just divert attention. If they send Scary D over, now PK are going to be losing out on one of their best team fight ultimates. If they decide to send Cubo, the exact same. Every individual piece of PK is required to make these team fights work.
It's a 3-2 split. They've got Adapting and Benji here in the middle lane. It looks like that we've got ourselves a pause. Don't worry, this game is too exciting for us to be out of it for long. We're going to get right back into it. But Myth, this could be the entire game here. Radiance need this siege to work.
They need it to work because if they fail it and they lose out on 3 members or even 2 members cleanly, you know PK is immediately going to return the offensive and run down the lanes and try and end the game themselves. Whichever team wins this fight, as long as it's remotely clean, it's going to spell the end of the match either way.
As long as it's clean, we could see another messy sort of fight. Not poorly played, but just in terms of how it ends with no clear winner. And then we're back to another Fire Giant dance. I don't know if Radiance gets Zapman off on his own near Primal Fury and not there for the fight the same way they did last time. So they need this to work if they're going to be able to close this game out. Benji to the right of the middle Phoenix. 3 members of Radiance in left, continuing to threaten. But the Knights have sent Scary D and Paul over to deal with the solo laner and jungler. That means Cyclone, Spin, Aurora, and Tings. All the damage is there with the setup. I like this split from Radiance. Mid-Phoenix under threat again as Benji continues to damage. He's tanking up the Phoenix all by himself, but he has to fall back now. Right side Phoenix is down so we can run out, but Cyclone Spin's down. The snipes hit from Zapman are huge. They did get the left side Phoenix though, that's huge, but they have to make sure they're able to disengage cleanly. We already highlighted how important this fight is.
That's about as good as you could hope for there. Well, not really. You could have hoped for a 5-man DSI and immediately move into the Titan, but only losing out on one member in exchange for a Phoenix, especially that Phoenix, is going to be highly valuable. Now, there's only one Phoenix left. One's going to respawn in about a minute on the right side of the map for PK. It's never going to be the same. That thing is weakened, and it's going to be much easier for them to clear out. I think Cyclone Spin, despite falling there, got a lot of value out of this Uller pick. He was able to rain arrows on Akuvo Fred twice, dropping him to about 50% before the engagement even started, which is why we never saw the Hebois get any value. He had to play back. He had to go back to his fountain a couple times and make sure that he was able to stick around in these engagements. He didn't get to use his ultimate, and he didn't get to use any of his damage. That said, you still lose out on the Ul, and it's likely going to return back to a state of equity. The Fire Giant's respawning in about 40 seconds. No buff left for Radiance, but PK still have to be worried about all these firemen waves coming down the side lanes.
That's right. Radiance still have the advantage because they've got those Phoenixes exposed. But without Cyclone Spin here, the Knights are getting aggressive into the jungle, trying to see who they can lock down. Tings, you're the target. You gotta run. They don't care about Aurora, narrowly avoiding the dazzling offensive as big man Ting, sorry, my support instincts came out. They want you, man. You gotta run. But they are able to make it out of there. Radiance hold on barely. Because look, fire minions are almost there in right. Zatman had to go defend it. More fire minions showing up in left. Radiance getting a bit bailed out by the pressure they established.
But now Tings no longer has his beads available to him, and the Fire Giant has already respawned. If PK are able to somehow muster their strength and regroup around that Fire Giant, BMT is gonna be the target. Only thing standing between him and death at this point is a very short-range flicker, his own damage, and an Aegis. And with all the damage output on the side of PK, a stray crushing wave, a couple shots of auto attacks from Zatman. Paul connects with anything. His ultimate, Neoma grabs him with a dash. It doesn't matter. BMT is going to fall down almost instantly. He's going to play very far back for the next minute or so until those beads are available.
Got to make sure we give BMT his credit, though. Undying throughout a 48-minute game. That is very hard to do. Benji, over in the left-hand side, is battling up against Scary D, perhaps looking to see if someone would come out to push up those minion waves, maybe could catch them out alone. Either way, both solo laners have teleport forward. They can rejoin this fight at any time if they choose, but Radiant's starting to back up. They don't quite like their chances pushing into the Knights.
That right side Phoenix has respawned at this point. There's no more fire waves over there, but that left side, the hardest to defend when Fire Giant is up, is what PK are contending with. And with Benji over there pushing waves in himself, that means that he's going to be pulling the attention of at least one member. It looks like it is going to be Scary D this time, who again is going to be hugely important to these team fights. That dazzling offensive, we saw it in the last set. Nika was able to completely change the face of the game. You want that same level of energy from Scary D, but Fire Giant falling very low.
Down to about 4,000 HP, and Radiant seem to be holding it here. They're not DPSing it at all. Very curious. They hold it now, they burn it, and they're able to just barely secure it. One of the first contested objectives we've seen go the way of Radiance. And look at Benji. He's trying to find a bit of a loop around the top side of the plate. Fred spots it out, though. Good knock-up stops Benji from finding a way to wrap around onto the fight. And left side Phoenix is about to respawn, too. This might be the best defense the Knights can hope for.
It really could be, but Benji's been continually putting pressure on the map. He's going to draw as much attention as he can. PK can't ignore him. He will be able to take a Phoenix on his own, especially with left side pushed up as far as it is. Those fire minion waves are going to be huge. PK have to be concerned about every single one of these Phoenixes, but they also have to stay grouped because they need to win the team fight.
Can't defend all three lanes at once. Not if Radiance can keep this kind of pressure up. They send Cuba, Fred, and Paul to deal with Benji. That means just 3 to defend 4 on the right-hand side, and no one to deal with the firemen in ways. Now they send Paul over there, but Benji certainly can win the 1v1. He ditches it, and instead comes over to right to join the squad, but Adapting gets popped. Big-time crits come out, and Adapting falls early on. Right side Phoenix still standing healthily. Benji goes up with the bat out of hell. Right side Phoenix does finally end up dropping, but Radiance have got to be looking for the disengage. Cyclone Spin is so low, but the dazzling offensive stuns him. Radiance still running as Aurora isolated way back where the right side Phoenix used to be, but the Knights can't chase. Aurora will die, so the rest of Radiance can live.
Zapman put in so much work in that engagement, almost single-handedly takes down Adapting, immediately backs up to his fountain, goes up in the air and drops Cyclone Spin to about 1/10 health himself, backs up to base, saves his left side Phoenix. Zapman's putting as much work in as you could expect of a ROM, even the best ROMs in the world, and right now it's starting to come to fruition. 2 members dead on the side of Radiance, there's still 3 alive with Fire Giant, but this might be PK's best opportunity to find a little bit of a push.
Look where Benji is. Is he trying to push for an end all by himself? They sent Scary D back to deal with him. That means it's only Big Man Tings and Cyclone Spin to defend in mid, and the Knights have to know that at this point. They can certainly barrel in past these carries, especially low on relics like Cyclone Spin is. Now Benji rejoins the squad, but the Knights are fully retreating. They no longer want to try and push into mid. Adapting was going to be up shortly. Aurora only 25 seconds behind that, and the Knights don't have any chance to push after all.
Yeah, Scary D called out the teleport and said that I can't back right now. There's fire minion waves flooding our base. I have to lock them down. So instead of taking that 4-on-4 engagement, a little bit risky for PK, they back up. They're going to try and reset, get their Phoenixes back alive. Now that the left Phoenix is back alive, they don't have to worry about it. It's much easier to send on the right side once the Dance of the Fire Giant starts up. PK's prerogative right now should be pushing up these waves so they don't have to be worried about the threat that Benji's been putting on, pressuring down every single Phoenix whenever he gets the opportunity. Benji does trade out his teleport, and Scary D doesn't have to use his, which means that he's going to be a little bit more versatile in the next engagement. Even then, we're looking at 2 minutes till Fire Giant respawns. Radiance is going to have it for another minute or so. It's going to be very hard with 3 members for PK to even look to take a fight.
We're 53 minutes into the game. Gold and experience mean nothing at this point, Mifflin. It's all about how well you can play the god you're piloting and how well you can group up as a team. Looks like we're going to see a late-game fight around this Oni Fury. This could be big in either direction. For Radiance, it could threaten, but Aurora pops Frenzy. He blinks in as well. Doesn't find anything with the push. Gets the Dharmic Pillars to come out, but Scary D goes right to the backline. Cyclone Spin and Big Man Tings are on top of each other, taking all the same damage, and that leaves Cyclone Spin in trouble. Low HP. Benji as well, as Paul gets that kill. Now they've got Aurora isolated and slowed. Nowhere for the Hercules to run at this point, as Paul gets the double. That might be it for the Knights. Only 3 left to defend.
Zapman is playing so incredibly on point. Every single ultimate, he's finding all 3 shots. He's landing autos where they need to go. His positioning has been pristine. I mean, he's been untouched in the last couple of engagements, and now 3 versus 5 in favor of PK, barreling down the center of the map. Scary D has to go back to base, keep his Titan alive, but he still has teleport.
Yeah, there's a reason Zapman's been the world and Zapman hasn't. Gotta give you an oldie but a goodie here as the rest of the Knights are grouped up around the middle lane. They've got the 4v3 advantage with Scary D defending right, but look at this poke from Cyclone Spin. It is still making it hard for the Knights to engage, even with this favorable position that they're in. They're slowly waiting outside the mid-Phoenix. They got 30 seconds because they still know that Benji and Aurora are not up yet, but big damage from Cyclone Spin nearly killed Neil. Scary D goes to the backline looking for Tings. Mid-Phoenix falls, and the Knights are right outside the Titan room, but they're still not pushing in. They have to be quick. Benji is back up in 15 seconds. The Knights start to pile onto the Titan. Adapting goes to the backline looking for Zapman. Neil is low, so is Paul, and the Titan still over half HP. Zapman is the one that ends up bowling first. What about Neil low in the back? Cyclone Spin can't find the damage. They lose Adapting. Crushing Wave immune by the Aegis. Kufo Fred gets the big time kill, but now Benji is back in the fray, going right into the backline to push the Knights out. Radiance are still in this one.
This is such thin margins in this engagement. Neilma was at sub 300 health for over 20 seconds
The
of that
whole
engagement.
time, basically.
And any arrow that touches him would have killed him.
Wait.
If Cyclone Spin was able to find a hail of arrows, that would have been enough. But the Titan is falling low. Scary D didn't do a good enough job pushing out the waves. Now they have to back up. Radiant's going to continue to put on pressure, not allow them to actually use the back mechanic. They're going to have to use their feet like peasants, but that Titan is falling
Can they just
fast.
walk in? No,
They
Radiance
might be
aren't
able
gonna
to.
keep the chase. They're not going to keep it up. It's so low. I thought they could have just walked in and tried to dump some damage, but Radiance think better of it here, Mifflin, and choose to back up instead. You're so right about these margins. It's thin, a tightrope they're walking this late into the game, approaching an hour, cresting soon, and who's asking for the game to end? Not me. This has been such a close battle. I could certainly watch more of it as Oni Fury does go down for Radiance. But look at this! The Bifrost from Paul! Is it all the way back at the Titan? It is! this, Mifflin. Paul's gonna try and end this by himself. Does he have the damage? Where are the backs from Radiance? Someone has to get here to stop this Heimdall. We have not seen the Bifrost used like this, but it will not work here. Paul did not have the damage. Benji makes his way in and gets the kill. Meanwhile, look at the Titan for the Knights. It's even lower, perhaps, than the one of Radiance. A thin margin at this point in the game, and the Knights want to just rush in. Neil Ma trying to brute force it. So is Cubo Fred, but the Radiance aren't going to allow it. Neil Ma gets cut down to size and left, and they won't allow Cubo to sneak his way in.
They won't, but Zapman has his ultimate available. All he needs is someone to walk into that base and pull some attention, and he would be able to follow up with a little bit of damage from a range. It seems like that's the plan. Zap and Cubo are over there, spotted out by Benji.
Benji's the only one that notices, though. Cyclone Spin's gonna come back to help, but Bat Out of Hell is not in time. Cubo Fred gets the kill. Axe, though, stops Cubo from joining him. In fact, Cyclone Spin gets the kill. So does Zapman have the damage? No. Benji and Big Man Tings are back in a roar. Goes for the end, drops the boulder, driving strike. 57 minutes in, and Radiance take game one.
What an absolutely barn-burning match at the end of the game. I didn't know which way it was going to go. PK was just going in on their own. Aurora wasn't going to back. The entirety of his team decides to back to defend his own base. Aurora just keeps marching forward through the mid Phoenix to find the end himself. And it all MVP minions, all right? MVP fire minions. They probably did about 10,000 Titan damage on their own to PK. Radiance, man, that was a close one.
It was close, man. Radiance came in with such an aggressive composition. Camazotz, Uller, the Hercules, it's all damage. That's all they had. But they were struggling in that mid-game myth when they ran to PK's teamfight comp. But eventually they were able to make it work.
They were, man. Those Fire Giant dances, talk about sitting on the edge of your seat. I had no idea which way this game was going to go. Both Titans were so absolutely vulnerable at the end, and it seemed like both teams kind of dedicated themselves to, I don't want to play this game for another 20 minutes. Let's go all in, all the way, every step of the way, and Radiance just come out ahead a little bit.
Yeah, we didn't quite make it to the hour mark, Myth, but we got close. What a game between Radiance and the Knights. I can only hope Game 2 is just as exciting. Let's get it down the desk to see what they think.
What an absurd game number one, and great job to Finch and Mifflin, I think, doing that one justice. Fantastic job on the call there, fellas. This one goes 57 minutes. And it looks like the Knights are going to run away with this one. Zapman putting in some serious work. Paul didn't show up in the kill and assist feed all that much, but he was doing massive amounts of damage. At the end of the day, I think, Gormizer, it is interesting calls from both teams. I bring up Paul. He did good damage. Gore, he just bifrosted into the Titan room, did a little bit of damage, and then died. It was so weird, but also so much fun to watch there at the end.
I think if the Titan had been closer, that call could have been a little bit stronger. Or if he had waited. I mean, they send two people in 30 seconds later. If you had been able to maybe have a little more patience there, I think it could have worked out a lot better for that final push. I mean, it was very close to getting eliminated. But the thing that I thought was interesting was a lot of this game kind of, well, started this way and ended this way. It just felt like Radiance were always in control. It was more Knights doing anything and everything they could in their power to hold on to it. Sometimes it was taking the objectives, sometimes it was turning it around. Zapman showing how strong his back muscles are from doing one-handed push-ups to carry Zapman to make sure that the team could stay ahead. I mean, there was a lot of time that those ROM just plays in general kept them alive. And I think that was very big. And also, it was something, you know, we were talking about before we came into this that I think might have been even biggest was simply the itemization on the side of the Knights, and more so adapting. Unfortunately, I must say unfortunately because of the point, gets a kill there at the very end, but I mean, there were 3 evolved shells and Nemean lions on, let's count it, 1, 2, 3 members throughout all of that. And who are you going to jump in on then? Now you have to, if all of them are popped at the same time, hit someone 8 times just to start dealing damage to them. Those 8 hits don't even deal damage to their health bar because of the block stacks. And maybe you're not going to find the perfect storm where 8 is the number, but 4 still going to be way too much time for a Nemesis to go in. And so you could see he kind of struggled a little bit. Definitely felt the impact from Big Man Team's damage, from Benji, and of course Cyclone's been coming through. A lot of good setup from Aurora. They just knew how to play the composition well there on Radiance.
Yeah, I think a lot of the focus around Cyclone and adapting, and that opened the door for BMT to nearly output 50,000 damage here in this 57-minute game. I think you zoom out of this one, though, Gormizer, and just kind of the mentality of both of these teams. We talked about how very important, really, for both of them to find a win here. That's got to be so frustrating for the Knights. I mean, a tough start out of the get-go here in phase number 2. You fall 0-2. Now you come up against another incredibly strong team here in this league. You nearly win the game. The minions, though, really a massive difference maker. They push down the solo lane, take down, 90% of the Titans' HP. Is it back to the drawing board, though? Gormizer, you look at the drafts here from both teams. Do you think the Knights need to scrap it and start fresh?
I don't know if they need to scrap it as much as I think they need to control Radiance a little bit more. I think that early game definitely dictated a lot of it. An early game for a 57-minute game, in my mind, is honestly those first 30 minutes, right? A lot of what Radiance had, again, it just felt like they were winning. Knights are taking objectives, and that's keeping them alive. But if they don't get that Gold Fury, if they don't get that Fire Giant, this game ends much sooner. They were able to stay alive through all of it, to the point where they gave us a very close late game and a close end game. But I think if you can control that first 10 minutes a little bit better, even maybe 20 minutes depending on the length of the game, then it's going to be a lot smoother for you to transition into it. So in my eyes, it's ban Hercules. Get him out of there. Just take it away from Aurora.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic reason on why we've seen Hercules banned out against Aurora time and time again, at least in phase 1. So far here, 1-0 on day 1 of week 2 of the SPL here in phase number 2. Let's jump into picks and bans, see what both of these teams bring to the table for us after a 57-minute game 1. And you it's kind of hard, I think, Gore, to remember the early game in a game that's that long. You think back to the First Bloods, all that it's thinking back to a different day at some point, because by the time everything is equal, it's just who shows up and who makes the plays. Radiance again are going to spend, though, a ban slot on this Hell. I think still smart. Take that away from Paul. Absolutely one of the picks there in his back pocket. I do want to get your thoughts, though, Gore. We have seen Hebo pretty consistently here today, whether it's mid lane or jungle. We've now seen it a good bit. Why do you think so much presence there for the Waterman himself?
I think one of the biggest things that's going to be able to come through is the fact that he two-taps people. I mean, that's
yeah,
what he brings more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think the ability to walk forward, you grab yourself the knock-up, you get the water hands, even if you don't have the big ultimate to immediately follow itself up, the Hebo is going to be doing an absolutely massive amount of damage there. I think one of the interesting talking points as well, if you start to look towards this mid lane, Persephone was far and away the most picked, not only mid laner, or not only mage, but mid laner in general in week number 1. We saw her 5 times out of 26 possible picks, 13 games specifically. Teams have started to, I think, pick up on that, Gormizer, and Persephone is now going to get consistently banned out.
Yeah, she did maybe too well, I think, when she was able to come through. I mean, even last week when we saw Twig have one maybe not so great game on her, I think he still did an insane amount of damage. And of course, her ult is maybe one of the most obnoxious to have to deal with. And I think Knights, again, not only recognizing where their strengths are, I like that 2 of these are targeting Aurora, right? You get rid of the Moja, you get rid of the Hercules, just to make sure that guy can't get away with what he's been getting away with. And honestly, the Nemesis, again, with the itemization the Knights went, isn't going to be that big of a threat. I think early on here, Adapting might be able to be a little more malleable, because he went straight into the standard auto attack kind of oriented build. If he pivots maybe a little bit sooner, if he sees builds like that, into something that's a little more ability-based, I think he can still have a huge impact on this game. So my eyes are on Adapting's, adaptability to see how well this Nemesis works.
Fair enough. Fair enough, and we're going to get to see another Hebo here, Gormizer, and I think that's a strong pick for reasons we've detailed here up to this point. Does still provide some flexibility. Obviously, Paul, very good at the Hebo out of the mid lane. Kivo Fred maybe wished for a better result after game 1, but I think looked decent, all things considered, on the Hebo out of the jungle. Now, the Neath pick is interesting. The only time we've seen Neath, it's been Big Man Tings in the mid lane on this Neath, so maybe that's where this pick starts to lean towards. We'll have to see maybe where the Knights go further on. Freya is banned out, Olarun is as well, so still some of those magical ADC options because that's what we've seen Radiance do. You put a magical ADC in the long lane, grab Neath there in the mid lane. So we'll have to wait and see on the next few picks here for the Knights. Cupid has been banned out a little bit, Goremizer, today, but is going to be locked in for Radiance here. The Love Man himself is going to work his way through into game 2.
And so, you know, as it's known, I play a ton of support. My wife is a carry main, and hunters are what she brings out the most. And so, Neath, probably her #1 most played, and I think she almost belongs in mid lane more than she belongs over there in the duo. So I think this is perfect for the Knights to be able to get that grip. And the way Cupid plays matches Neath pretty well. He's got a recent buff to his clear. He's going to have some heals he can drop over for his jungler whenever they come through, so that's going to be able to help that. A nice, huge team fight ultimate. Like, you list off everything he has in order. And it sounds like you're describing a mage. It just happens that everything he does is also physical damage, and he has some pretty good auto attack in there as well. He also has some flexibility. You level up your 3 maybe instead of your 2, and all of a sudden you're getting some attack speed off of that level up. Maybe you're hurting Adapting's ability to heal, but I think there's a lot of ways to be malleable with Cupid, and I think they can play it to adapt to Neath. But I think a lot of it is going to be able to lock down both the Hebo and the Neath, force either beads, ults, something to make them get away from him, or to try and lock him down, since he's going to have a safety dash just to get him away from them.
Fields of Love could be good against this Medusa here as well. Picked once, I believe is what 6% would translate to. Hasn't won yet, hasn't been banned out. You know, I see it in the casual games, the ranked games all the time. Medusa seems to be in a good spot here. But at the SPL, Goremizer, is it something that can work?
I think so. I just think you have to, you have to be the right hunter, right? And I think when you come into it and you're playing, or the right player, I should say, realistically.
Right.
I think what they have on the other side right now, potentially now sending that Cupid over there into the duo lane, I think Medusa, again, her peak is really mid-game. I think you look at Atalanta's bow, which has been very big for a lot of these hunters, and she kind of already has that passive. It's literally her passive that comes through, except it's not, you know, dependent on getting kills. She just strafes like nobody else. So I think there's a lot that can make her work, but a lot of the itemization, if you want to go ability-based, it works for her. Honestly, in this kind of composition, you could flip her and Neath, and no matter what, I think you're going to feel fine. But you can also build her to do auto attack. Now that the Viper shot has 4 instead of 3 shots in it, you're going to be able to get some of that initial boxing damage, I think, a little bit faster, and that's going to help you take on someone like Cupid, especially since he's going to be looking for some CC. You don't necessarily have anything that helps you set up your ult, but I think for the most part, she's going to be fine. The worst part is her dash, and that's just because it can be blocked pretty easily.
That's right. I'm excited to see what the Knights are able to forge with Medusa here. In game number 2, Discordia and Cabrakan, though, Goremizer round out the Radiance draft. Obviously, BMT great on the Disco. Cabrakan, not a lot of data points, admittedly, to talk about that pick all that much. Are those 2 picks that you think round out the Radiance draft somewhat well?
I like the Discordia. Cabrakan's such a wild card that I have no idea how hard I want to lean on that. I mean, it's one of those things that you could, if you didn't have that Nemesis, throw him into the jungle. I think it's going to be support, and when you're looking at Hercules being banned out, you're talking about aggression. I think this guy is going to cause a lot of trouble for that duo lane. I think it's going to be a lot of damage. It's easy lockdown. Medusa has a dash, not a leap, so those walls are going to keep her locked in. I think Cabrakan is used here almost exclusively to bully Medusa, and I think it's going to bully her hard.
Yeah, it's not Hercules, but Cabrakan will still walk at you. Radiance looking to go back-to-back in game number 2. John Finch, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dave. Let's move into game 2 and pray that it's this half as exciting in game number 1. Still Finch and Miff here, and still Doug after that hour-long grind fest bringing us the views. Are you surprised all by some of this draft here, Biff? We got Cabrakan to talk a little bit about. Obviously, Amir has been more popular lately here as well. What do you like about what you're seeing?
I think Cabrakan Cupid might be the most gnarly, grimiest kill lane I've ever seen, especially come level 5. If you're struggling to land Field of Love, there's nothing more that you could ask for than a literal cone of wall to lock them in there. Aurora and Cyclone Spin are looking to do work together. And looking at PK's draft, these guys like to play with fire, these highly volatile picks. If Neilma doesn't get off to a hot start on this Ymir, my man's just going to melt under the pressure. Ymir is one of the most exploitable Guardians in the early game, and Cuvo Hebo picking this Hebo is a little bit more exploitable than the majority of mage jungles that you would see, or even assassin jungles, but since he decides to go for the more defensive relic inside of beads, he will have that added level of safety. Either way, PK's draft is lacking a little bit in terms of confirmable lockdown CC. It almost seems like it's all on Ymir again, because you have this no CC soul laner inside of Camazotz, and Hebo's just going to be looking to keep himself alive.
Aurora already level 2, but a good sprint from Neil Ma means the Aurora can't find the stun. That very likely would have been more than just a stun, would have been first blood, but Neil Ma narrowly avoids finding that similar fate. And you talked about the volatility that the Knights left. Wait, there's already a gank and right, Scary D in trouble. Scary D is dead. Adapting finds a first blood to kick the game off barely a minute into it.
Yeah, but he's going to trade out his red buff for that. But Adapting's fine with that. First blood for a buff that he's not even going to pick up. If it was speed, maybe Adapting feels a little bit differently. Red buff,
yeah, BMT,
we don't care,
that.
BMT. Yeah, hold that, hold my jockstrap, whatever you got to do, just I'm going to do what I got to do. Let me win this game before an hour long. Radiance has got to be tired after that first match. And Adapting on this Nemesis finding first blood, usually you expect to see her hit her power spike second, third item. Nah, Adapting's looking to get started right now.
There's the blink stun, though, from Aurora. Tremors to lock him down. The heart bomb should be the fadeaway kill. No, Aurora says, you had your chance, Cyclone. That's mine. Now, that's 2 on the board for Radiance. The Cyclone spin's not done, dashing into Zapman, forcing his dash defensively, as Radiance seem to have pressure in every lane except mid.
Except mid, but you know what? That's fine.
All the
we
important
already
places.
established that we don't care. Yeah, everywhere that isn't BMT's lane, and that's fine. All right, Adapting got first one. Either way, let's talk about the Kabrakan changes, because Aurora's been making very good use of them. Now, when he channels the Tremors on his third ability, it groups up the minion wave a lot more easily, which is going to benefit Cupid greatly. Sometimes Heart Bomb struggles to hit the entirety of the wave, not when they're all standing right on top of each other.
Damn, I got Mifflin as a nice to work with tier 2, making some good analysis. This is easy for Fitch here in the tier 1 spot. You're exactly right, man. That's why I think they're pairing the Cupid with it. His early game clear was really his only struggle, and is adapting back for more. I don't think Scary D realized that he might be staring down the barrel of another early game death, but still has the leap. No slow comes through this time, so fortunately, Scary D survives. Cubo Fred is here to defend the blue buff as well. As long as he can get it quickly, Adapting's on the way, blue buff secured, and disaster averted for the PK solo lane.
Look, Scary D might not have been aware coming into it, but that young man Belair has got the reaction times of a god. He just needed to see for a split second that Nemesis was behind him to use the jump to avoid the slice and dice. I'm sure he's on damage control now. Scary D is not looking to fall again, especially considering the rest of his team isn't doing too hot either. Every single piece that PK have to play well to deal with this early deficit. It's only about 400 gold, but with the late game draft, and especially inside of this Nemesis, you want to make sure you're making up the dividends.
Big grouping around the red buff for the Knights. They want the invade. Cubo was waiting to see if there was any pick potential. There wasn't, so they'll settle for the buff invade instead. Able to make their way out of there A-okay, but still, the start to the game has been all Radiance. They're only up about 300 gold, though. It's certainly not backbreaking. In fact, look at Solo. Scary D hit 5 first, as did Cubo, as the experience would favor that, just as Doug was just showing us. The experience in favor of Knights, but the gold in favor of Radiance. In the early game, you might see that sometimes, as it hasn't quite all settled just yet, but gotta be careful. Cubo Fred is here lurking in the jungle. Will end up taking the back, though, when he sees no gank opportunity.
It's going to be hard in general for Cubo to gank down that lane. There's not too much lockdown. If Neilma finds a great wall to stop Cupid's dash, that's one way, but that's really the only way to stop the escape from the duo lane of Radiance. And the peel potential of Aurora on this Kabrakan, I mean, we like to talk about how strong of an engaged Kabrakan's ultimate is, but drop a cage down around your buddy, no one's getting through it quick enough to lock him down.
They'll provide engage or peel, whichever one that they need. And with this composition, I mean, it really might be leaning towards the peel more often, but we saw the way Radiance played last game with their death ball composition. If they've got some ways to move in and find kills, they're going to take them, so wouldn't be surprised if things end up going that way. But despite the fireworks in the early game, that early 2-0 start for Radiance, this game's still very, very close here right now, Mifflin, so we can turn to parity just a little bit. Medusa and Cupid, both ability-based hunters. Are you surprised they both went the Devourer's Glove start over maybe Transcendence, or you think Devourer's Glove makes sense?
I think Devour's Gloves and Transcendence is an argument that really is only to be made around Hachiman and Ullr. Those are the two gods in the game that I would say that you really have to build Transcendence. Short of that, it's really up to preference, and with the new build paths coming along, with Fail Not being a fantastic pen and cooldown option, Devo's Gloves into anything else is going to work out. If you want to guild crit, you don't really need to sacrifice power just because there's so much more available to Hunters with these Season 7 changes.
Yeah, I think somehow Devourer's Gauntlet has ended up getting a pretty bad rap. It's still certainly an excellent item to start with. In terms of eventual power, you end up with plenty, unmatched in terms of the lifesteal it can provide for you as well. A great way to start off any build. And obviously Transcendence certainly fine too. But I think I agree, Mifflin. I think in a lot of cases you can build it either way and still plenty ability focused if you want, or basic attack focused too, really without too much trouble.
I agree. And in slotting Devo's Gloves so early in your build, if you don't go Devo's Gloves and instead you go Transcendence, hold on, Scary D might just die again. I'll let you take this.
Yeah, this certainly looks like a problem for Scary D. Wants to try and find a return kill, but Slice and Dice says no, adapting getting 2 kills off the PK solo laner and his early game aggression.
So yeah, what I was saying about Devo's Gloves. So if you go Transcendence early on in the build, that means if you really want lifesteal as a hunter, your only options are either going to be Bloodforge, which we haven't been seeing too often, or Aussie. If you go Devo's Gloves, you can get your cooldown, which is the main benefit of Transcendence in my eyes. You might as well just go Fail Not and get it the same way.
Devo Fred looking for the kill. In comes the Neath ultimate, but adapting blocks it. That almost keeps it Benji alive. In fact, it does. Big brain plays from Adapt King. Put the crown back on his head as he keeps Benji alive.
Yeah, Adapting's the best player in the world. That is single-handedly the most mechanically intricate play I've ever seen. And Benji, you're gonna tarnish it and die to a harpy? Not okay, bro. Adapting gave you your life, and you're just gonna give it away to a literal NPC? I'm upset. I'm upset about that.
Whoa, man, that's unheard of, that kind of thing. Benji making an absolute mistake there, dying to a camp. You know, we were wondering with some of the changes to the way camps aggro now, if there would be a few more pro deaths to the camps. But that's not the case there, man. My man walked in thinking he would kill it. Adapting has to come save him from the camp as well as he cleans it up. Unfortunate death there for Benji, certainly.
Yeah, Adapting's gotta be spitting on the ground, angry. At least he got his own farm to himself. Benji didn't deserve that back camp.
That doesn't ruin the play, though, right, Myth? It's still sick.
No, Adapting's nuts, and he saved Benji. Man, I'm upset about it in general. Either way, now Benji's got to contend with what was a lead in favor of him because Scary D's died a couple times to about an even lane because he decided to die to a buff. But overall, Radiance are doing just fine. They've been able to maintain this 200 gold lead for a little while now. Scary D is going to tick up to level 9 before Benji is, and you know what? Deserved. You got to hold that L, Benji. You earned it.
All right, so here's the thing about how Benji is insane. He's sick. He's one of the best players in the whole world. I'm not going to roast him over dying to one camp. In the solo lane, across all these years I've been watching, few have been as consistently dominant as Benji. I feel the need to read his Wikipedia page because of what we just watched, but I want to remind you guys, this kid is absolutely nuts, so it's okay. One occasional death to a camp. We certainly won't be hanging him over that as Scary D gets aggressive for the back harpies. That was his leap. He still has Bat out of Hell, and my man is going to need it. Adapting and Tings are here. He goes up into the Bat out of Hell, but where can he go from here? Adapting has the top end path. He heads back towards mid. Not able to find it with the ultimate. The bounce doesn't get there either, but Adapting, as he has done all game, cleans things up. Gold Fury stopped as Aurora gets the wall, locks in Neil, and Cyclone Spin right there with the Heart Bomb for the kill. Kibo Fred used the crushing wave that does allow Paul to get the kill, but it costs him his life. A 3-for-1, and there might even be more as Zapman falls as well. A double for Adapting, 4-for-1 for Radiant across the map.
Adapting is running an absolute clinic on this match, and he was able to blink over that mid wall, and he was almost able to block another one of these Neath ultimates, but instead he's going to pick up his 5th kill of the game, set up his team for a Gold Fury. This is huge ups for Radiance. This is a very large lead, 9 minutes in the game, and I want to talk about that synergy from Cyclone Spin and Aurora. Cyclone Spin went up and dropped the Fields of Love. That's messed up, production. This is okay.
Maybe a little toxic in the back room, but we love it. Got to see it one more time. How often does that end up happening? But go ahead, break down the fight a bit more for me.
Yeah, Cyclone Spin dashes up, drops Field of Love. He didn't really have any way to lock him down, and then immediately Aurora out of nowhere comes in, locks them down inside of it, and turns the fight around completely. And that's a lot of trust you have to put in your support to make sure that they're there to make those plays happen. And then a lot of trust you got to put in your jungler to just be able to find 5 kills in 10 minutes.
Yeah, Adapting has had an excellent game, and I think that this could be a really important phase for Adapting because I talked about a lot. I don't think Adapting has fallen off. I think a lot of the other junglers in the FPL have just caught up. There was a while where he was that far ahead of everyone else that it wasn't close, but this could maybe be the phase where he shows us he can certainly still take over games. And PK are not some bums, man. If he's doing it up against the world champions, you know he's nasty. Cubo Fred locked down by Aurora. Another easy kill as Big Man Ting puts in the apple for the last bit of damage. Radiance in full control.
Man, Aurora is looking so good on this Bracken. First time we've seen it in the SPL, and it is making up for it in dividends. Nice Strife.
One of the best abilities in the game, I won't stop saying it. Adapting frozen though at the tower line. Dash allows the reposition. Good wall from Neil, but it will not save his life as Big Man Tings gets his second kill of this engagement. Radiance, by these thin margins, keep coming out on top. The Knights are letting this one get away from them.
They are. I mean, Adapting, making it out alive there. I mean, I would have thrown up the F6 vote. That's got to be a heartbreaker for him. Now, Paul doesn't have his ultimate available. He's going to be half health in lane. BMT's just throwing out strikes from wherever he wants. Aurora's been largely uncontested in every single engagement. We're seeing infinitesimally more value out of this Bracken than we are out of Ymir, and they're doing largely the same thing. Setting up with walls, finding the stuns, getting a little bit of damage. The Tremors have been coming into huge plays for them. And Cyclone Spin on this Cupid, he's showing that it's not just Ven who's able to play it. He's looking very dominant.
That's right. It's a great point how good Cyclone Spin's been looking on this pick, but I think that this could potentially end up opening up the drafts for Radiant in a really big way here, Myth, because a lot of teams just by default ban away Aurora's Hercules, but if Aurora's going to be this nasty on whatever he pulls out, the Bracken of all things, then I don't know how much value you're getting out of your Hercules ban anymore. He'll just control the game on anything in the Guardian tab.
Yeah, and he's doing it in largely the same ways. He's not playing a facilitator style. He's playing as if he was just another Hercules. He's looking for damage constantly. The displacement isn't quite there in the same way, but the lockdown potential is so much greater because of these walls. There's a double hunter on the side of PK, which means those walls should fall relatively quickly come late game. But until then, PK's just going to have to hold that because they're not able to group up and take on these 5-on-5 engagements. They're not able to take on engagements in general. The slash line's 9-1, and that's not a mistake.
The gold, though, still relatively close. Still here for this point in the game, only not even a full 2,000 gold ahead, so certainly not, you know, disaster. This isn't a nightmare for PK, but certainly still scary. I mean, even the experience relatively close, only 1,800. So yeah, Radiance have 9 kills, and we're only 13 minutes in, but they got to make sure they're converting those 9 kills into a substantial lead, or else PK will just take you to 57 minutes again like they did in Game 1.
The XP chart is going to be slightly skewed now because PK has the majority of their lead on one character. It's Scary D. He's gone down 0-3, but every single time he respawns, he comes back, clears a wave, has been able to steal away these back camps from Radiance so consistently, and now Cyclone in a little trouble.
But avoids the crushing wave. That might be enough for him to live. If another one can come up, no, an auto is all it takes. They have to use 3 ultimates to kill him, but Cyclone Spin does fall. I don't know if he just bought Aegis on backing or not, but he did not use it to help there in that left-hand gank. Either way, though, the Knights finally able to get another kill on the board.
9-2, and the lead is still getting cut down every step of the way. Radiance hasn't been able to pull by and large ahead, but Gold Fury's just now respawning, 30 seconds till, and I imagine Radiance, with the lead that they've had and the control that Aurora's been affording them in every single one of these engagements, Gold Fury should be on every single one of their minds. But if PK is able to rotate out Scary D from the solo lane, get there before Benji does, or even at the same time, Scary D's going to have way more damage. He's got a 2-level lead already, and take a peek at his ability, goes into Sledge, he's gone into Void Shield. That's a lot of deceptive damage and a bit of tankiness as well.
It is, especially up against Benji and Cyclone Spin, right? They're going to have a hard time chewing through all of that to try and find the end of those kills. So I think Scary D has come out of this laning phase ahead, especially considering all the attention Adapting has paid to him. Really, I think that's the reason these charts look so bad. Adapting spends all this time in solo, and instead of getting Benji ahead, Benji's 2 levels behind. It's just not an effective use of his time in the end because of the relative value the Amaterasu and the Kamazats are going to be providing at this point in the game. If I'm Adapting, I think I'm a little tilted at how this early game has gone. What more do you have to do?
Look, if I'm adapting, and I'm certainly not, and I don't think anyone is except for him because he's so sick, I'd be tilted as well. He blinked in to block a Neath ult, and the man died to back. I gotta get over it. We gotta move on because Gold Fury's respawning, and PK have the defensive positioning. Now Radiance are gonna work their way in.
You know, I want to move on too, but if he is literally behind Scary D, that's part of the reason. I don't think we can leave it behind, right? So if he was ahead like he should be, maybe we could leave it in the past and bygones are bygones. But it has hurt this team legitimately at this point, and now PK are pulling the Primal Fury. They've recognized, despite the kill counts, that they can start this fight up. Neomar has been isolated inside the Primal Fury, though. Pittsburgh Knights do secure the objective. They'll certainly lose Neomar for it, but what about Zapman on the back? He's got to worry about adapting, locking him down. Another kill for the King as he shuts down the Medusa. Scary D running away on the backside. The Knights got the objective. They've evened up the game in terms of gold, but the kills still heavily favor Radiance.
And they might be able to take down that tier 1 mid tower. It's so low, but it seems like the majority of them are willing to commit themselves to the chase, and Cyclone Spin might just commit himself to the grave. If the water spout comes back up, that should be enough. Beads are used from Cubo Fred, but that will put Cyclone Spin down. No objectives could go the way of Radiance here. They might be willing to group up around this Pyromancer, but so far, PK got away with a lot of murder there. I really like Neilma's play to go ahead and channel the ultimate. There's not many situations in Smite where you can call it checkmate, but had Radiance decided to commit to killing Neilma with the recent Ymir changes, the damage still would have come through and he would have confirmed the objective. He just has to give up his life.
An excellent play there by Neil, and really, despite the 0-4 slash line for Neil, the 0-3 slash line for Scary D, 0-2 for Zapman, they've played very well this game. They've kept it incredibly even, and Radiance have not done enough work to convert a couple of kills from adapting into any kind of meaningful lead. Even he is only barely ahead of Cubo Fred in terms of experience, and not even really ahead in itemization, so there's not a lot to show for adapting's excellent early game. This is why sometimes the kill count, the slash lines, the KDAs, they don't tell the whole story, man. The Knights have done a great job of keeping this game even.
They have. It's only about 200 gold in favor of Radiance. I mean, that's nothing. Experience, the only difference is about 60. Anyone who clears a minion is going to pull a lead at this point. This game's as close to even as you could want, and I think a lot of it is really due to the fact that Scary D somehow pulled ahead in this lane and created space and still was able to pull the attention of Adapting. Adapting wasn't able to go to mid to look for ganks or duo, and the entire time he's looking to keep Scary D down, but he just maintains the lead.
Has been ulted this time by the World Weaver from Paul, forced out by Aurora. Benji able to survive all that aggression, but you're right, man. There's a ton of ways, I think, to build up an early game lead, and Radiance went with getting Benji ahead. We'll talk about it later as the wall actually works against Radiance. This time, Zapman makes it out of there with a perfectly timed dash, and this feels like part of the problem here for Radiance. I know that they normally execute those plays, but they're just these very small little pieces away from really fighting any substantial lead.
But they were able to take away some very valuable resources. Zapman has to commit his ultimate and his beads. Now he's going to be very susceptible to any form of CC. If Cyclone Spin's left alone in a 1v1 against Zapman, no CC immunity means that Fields of Love is going to be very impactful, and we might even see a solo kill. Cubo Fred might have to hover around that side of the map to just ensure his safety.
No Fury or Pyromancer to look for now, so we might see things slow down a little bit here, Myth, and things remain at this parity. So now that we know that we're going to be moving into the mid to late game stages with basically an even game, which comp do you favor here more? I mean, Cupid is certainly a strong team fighting presence. Nemesis only gets stronger, but on the other side, the Knights have two very strong hunters in the late game.
I think I still would favor out Radiance. Those hunters are going to be so susceptible to any form of lockdown, and they're really lacking on confirmable CC on the PK side of the map. I mean, you can maybe rely on a root from Neath, a wall from Ymir, a freeze, but outside of that, there's really not much they can do. Medusa ult's going to be very hard to find the actual stun from. Scary D's got no real forms of CC in his entire kit. Cubo Fred's got a knock-up, but for the majority of the time that's going to be used for poke from a range or self-heal. I'm worried about how PK are going to be able to engage these fights if Neilma isn't absolutely perfect on this Ymir.
And to your credit, all of Fred's ganks have needed the World Weaver from Paul, the Neath ultimate, in order to make them work. That's because they don't have that traditional engage. In a lot of ways, they've been covering up those gaps throughout the early game by letting Neath provide that CC so Fred can close the gap. I don't know how well that's going to work in a full-on 5v5. I mean, Paul can't stop to get a World Weaver just for setup, I don't think, if they're in the middle of a 5-on-5 battle.
He can't. He's going to have to play very far back, but he's itemizing towards using that ultimate as the best part of his kit. Take a peek at that Heartseeker. He's going to be chunking.
Aurora does commit the ultimate, and if they get the tower for it, so it ends up being worth as they take care of that mid-tier 1. But as he said, that confirmed that control in these team fights might be the biggest element. Now, a weave with a spirit arrow through it from Neath is still really good control in a fight. A big AoE root could still be strong. As you mentioned, the freeze, potentially multiple man stun from Zapman on his ultimate. It's just not as consistent as what Radiance is going to have on their side between the Fields of Love, these walls and stuns from Aurora. But that is not deterring the Knights. They're the ones pulling the Gold Fury. Fields of Love is there, and Radiance steal away the objective this time, getting a little bit of revenge after game 1. Neil Ma has been locked down. Shards of Ice is about all he can do. Good ultimate from Zapman provides some peel, but Radiance continue to push forward. It's the wall from Neil that finally slows down the aggression, but Radiance strip away the objective and start to get a bit of a lead going.
And they take away Fred's ultimate as well. No resources just about available on the side of PK. A lot of the actives were used. Ymir had to use every single one of them. The only ultimate available is Nice. Not going to be great in a team fight. We already see that Paul's charging it up in the back, but it's not going to be followed up by much. This tier 2 tower should go down relatively easily.
Adapting, looking for the loop around the back, but he's not going to get there in time. Aurora has been isolated by a great wall from Neil Ma, and that means Adapting never gets to spring the trap shut. Instead, Radiance are fully retreating, and I think that wall in response to Aurora's wall is a pretty good answer, man.
Yeah, you're stuck in a cage of your own construction. I mean, that's poetic justice. Fred gets caught out by Adapting's ultimate, but is able to make it out alive. Discordia throws out the golden apple, or the giant dead fish with this skin. Doesn't make its way home either. Radiance weren't quite able to confirm themselves that tier 2 tower, but they do steal away the Gold Fury. With Aurora respawning in the next 8 seconds, I don't think PK can feel too confident moving in towards the Pyromancer, but they can set up some defensive wards, or just pull the Pyromancer.
They've got it pulled. Big Man Ting and Cyclone Spin are nearby, but they cannot walk in alone. This will happen. Cyclone Spin frozen. Cyclone Spin able to dash and reposition, but he'll certainly die. Scary D cleans it up. PK gets the Pyromancer, and you just can't have your carries trying to face check on their own. They'll end up getting blown up. That's why Aurora falling was so critical. Now, the wall to isolate Benji turns around for the stun onto Scary D, but they don't have the follow-up. PK get the pick onto Cyclone Spin and the Pyromancer, and make it out safely.
Neil Ma's using these walls to such great effect. The second they're no longer necessary, he destroys them and it puts them immediately on a cooldown again, which means he's going to have these walls effectively way more often. That's a bit of a sneaky buff that some people don't really consider about Ymir, is the ability to destroy your wall means that you can reposition it that much more quickly. You're going to get a lot more time to use that ability and look for these separated engagements, and that's really where the strength of Ymir lies. Now he's been able to really show us that he's got a couple of tools in his bag. He can lock down the Cupid, he can make sure that Aurora, if he decides to use his own ultimate, is going to be stuck in a cage. There's a lot that this Ymir is going to bring to the team, but even then, that freeze is the best stun we've seen from him all game. It does result into a kill for Cyclone Spin, or onto Cyclone Spin, but now that his beads are available and Aegis, it's going to be hard to replicate that.
That's the tier 1 tower in right in favor of Radiance, finally taking that one down. Benji and Scary D now even in terms of experience, so as long as all ends well, perhaps past transgressions can indeed be forgotten. Fire Giant got to be the next place that we're going here, Myth. And how do you see this fight breaking down? I mean, the Knights have such a great ability to force an overcommit with the wall. They isolate whoever steps forward, whether it's Benji or Aurora, and the rest of the team really can't help. Who do you favor in the FG fight?
It depends on who gets to the Fire Giant first. If Radiance are able to set up the defensive positioning, I would say that their team fight in general is a much stronger. But if PK is able to get there first, that means that it's really going to be exactly as you said. Neil's going to be able to separate the fight artificially with these walls. I think it really comes down to who's willing to show up first and put up an actual fight. if Radiance does get there, their team fight is just so absolutely strong. The burst potential from each one of these individual pieces, and Adapting's been having a fantastic game as well. I have to favor them.
6-0-2 for Adapting. Serrated Edge being picked up as that final item. A big topic of discussion is how often are, your abilities sort of on that cooldown to get the maximum value out of this item. Nemesis, one of those gods who can perhaps benefit from it the most. Aurora blinks past Neil Ma. They're going to commit the Fields of Love onto Neil as well. But way in the backline, Big Man Ting's able to get the kill to Cubo Fred. That's Benji that sets that up. It cost him his life though, 1-for-1, but Aurora has 2 members locked in the Tremors. Scary D goes up to the sky with the bat out of hell, but Cyclone Spin able to live through it and put out some return damage. There's the root coming up from Discordia as well. Not able to quite catch up to him with the unruly magic, so Pittsburgh Knights can't find the disengage, but Adapting closes the gap with the dash, but loses. Whoa. That man turns around with the autos and gets the better of the Adapt King, but keeps them in range for Cyclone Spin and Big Man Ting to clean up. Still worth it if you ask me.
Yeah, 3 for 2 in favor of Radiance, and now they still keep their ADC alive. Their mage is alive as well. The support, that means that they can easily tank this up. The only one in range to defend it is Paul, and on Neath, there's not much he can do. He doesn't have a ton of 1v3 potential. Scary D teleports in from behind. No ultimate up.
Unfortunately, even the root not that effective against the Cabraca, but Scary D still doing work. He's low inside the Fire Giant pit. They get the kill, but Cyclone Spin can't make it back in to help at this point. No, he is able to brute force his way through, takes care of the Fire Giant. It costs Aurora his life. Golden Apple almost finds the pool angle to get back there. Nice geometry work there from Tings. But either way, Radiance have the Fire Giant on Benji, Tings, and Cyclone.
Yeah, Benji respawns just in time to get the benefit of that Fire Giant. A little bit lucky. Adapting's going to respawn in the next second as well. 3 members with Fire Giant, and your ADC being one of them means that Tier 2 towers should melt relatively easily. That said, I really do prefer when the support is able to maintain that Fire Giant. You want to have that tanky target to make use of that HP5 who can just soak up the damage from these towers. That's going to be very hard for Aurora to sustain through these fights, but that might be mitigated just a bit because Cupid's healing, we haven't really talked about it just yet, but it is essentially a free heal every 10 seconds or so, giving you about 500. That's going to be very impactful on these elongated fights around these objectives.
Good point. It certainly can't be overlooked. All my assault memes out there in chat know Cupid certainly can put out some decent healing. It can feel at times when you're trying to go up against it without any substantial healing of your own. Radiance now, though, certainly in the driver's seat here, Meth, and deciding where they'd like to go on the map. It looks like they're pushing up left. That's where the weakest Tier 2 tower is, and obviously the most valuable Phoenix. So I like this call to try and group and force this down. Plenty of time to work with on the Fire Giant buff.
And their siege potential is so high. That Fields of Love is essentially going to be a no-play zone inside of your towers, which means he's going to lock down the entirety of that tower's range. You won't be able to stand between him and the objective, and he just needs a little bit of time, Cyclone Spin that is, to work on these objectives to really put them down.
Stepping in first is Benji, gets early. Fields of Love to try and isolate some members. The Tectonic Shift doesn't find a whole lot either, but Scary D goes up to the sky with the bat out of hell that forces everybody out. They regroup though, plenty healthy, and Tier 2 tower comes down. A bit more than we normally see committed from a soft defense. 3 ultimates used on the side of the Knights, but they don't overcommit. They don't really use any relics, so they're still ready to defend on Phoenix.
3 ultimates used means that they can't really commit anything to defending Tier 2s anymore, so if Radiance want to, they can make a slow sweep of the map and just clear out all these last couple towers, back up, spend the gold that they've earned, maybe even move back towards the Pyromancer.
Still haven't gotten this Tier 2 tower, and it looks like the Knights are willing to at least show some face around it, but eventually Radiance get on there, put the 1 auto they need, and take that tower down. Looks like the call to fall back towards maybe the Pyromancer. No, they do want to head over towards the right side, Tier 2, and I like this. You really want to get every bit of golden lead from this FP that you can. This game was deadlocked up until now, but Radiance have created a big lead off that Fire Giant fight. Neil Ma with the wall wants to isolate in members, but it's Neil Ma who's been caught out. Tier 2 tower gets cut down, and Radiance are ready to retreat. Maybe not,
and Neil keeps stepping forward.
Yeah, with the Fields of Love, that means Newmaw falls first. Cubo Fred falls as well. Cyclone Spin gets the double. What looked like a disengage might be way more than that. Right side Phoenix is already in the cards. Benji tries to isolate Zapman as Scary D step forward for Cyclone, but now he's stuck inside the Tremors, locked in here with me, as no one's put damage to the right side Phoenix yet. Now it comes tumbling down, and Radiance perhaps skipped a little bit extra on the back of that Tier 2 push.
Neilma was looking so hard to separate the fight with a wall, maybe find a freeze and turn that engagement around, but he wasn't being cognizant of his own health bar. Now Cupid, those hearts are starting to come into play. Everyone's about full health, and PK, just about no ultimates available.
Big strike from Discordia locks down Zapman and Scary D. Now they get mid Phoenix and right Phoenix, all because Pittsburgh Knights try to re-engage. Benji ends up dropping. In comes the apple, lands onto Scary D, but Neil Ma back up. Zapman with the double, able to shut down Aurora. Radiance have finally overstepped at this point as they stick around too long. There's the slow, though, from Adapting. Another good wall from Neil. Allows for Scary D to catch back up, but Big Man Tinks still providing the peel. Radiance should be able to make it out, but they want to re-engage. Adapting, able to find Zapman in the back. Scary D falls as well yet again. Pittsburgh Knights walk happily into the trap of Radiance, not suspecting a thing.
That's twice now that Cyclone Spin has just been running away, running away, running away. Oh, Fields of Love is up. Let me turn around. Yeah, this is my fight now. And he turns it around completely. Now 3 members dead on the side of PK for the next 40 seconds. Not much that Radiance can do since Fire Giant does fall off and no Gold Fury or Oni Fury available. But they will have plenty of time to work the map, make sure they get vision established, and set themselves up for another Fire Giant. With 2 Phoenixes down on the side of PK, it's going to be very hard for them to want to move in and actually take that fight around Fire. They might have to fully commit themselves to defending their Titan. Again, this is no strange position for PK. They were here for about an hour last game. It doesn't really matter. They can put up that defense. That said, this is the biggest lead we've seen in the set so far.
Gonna make it much harder for the Knights to find that same miracle defense they had last game. Looks like Radiance are gonna stop off at the Enhanced Fire Giant, the EFG, and pick this up on their way towards, I imagine, left side Phoenix after this. That's the only one still standing. Looks like Kimo Fred's recognizing it though and trying to step forward, but he has got to be careful. He gets caught out here. Hard to imagine that he could survive. The wall from Neilma isolates Benji, but Benji keeps going. They go right to Zapman in the back line, force the dash away from the squad. That means Neilma's all alone, and Aurora gets that kill. Golden Apple lands on the Cubo Fred. 782 and sidesteps the crushing wave, completely breaking the ankles of Cubo Fred. Scary D all alone. Cyclone Spin completes the rampage. 5 in a row as he shuts down Scary D and Mifflin. I got to imagine that's it. Only Paul and Zapman. No way they can defend alone.
It would take it very close to a miracle, especially if Zapman's not even allowed to return to base. He's got to contend with Benji, while the rest of Radiance is barreling down the Titan. That's going to be pretty impactful. And here's the thing, Finch, how I think Cupid might be the best hunter in the game. Cyclone's been proved that to me, and I really do think it.
Yeah, Cupid right now looking very, very strong. So are Radiant as they take the set in 2 games up against Pittsburgh Knights. Maybe trying to grab a last-minute deicide here as Paul is low in the back. There it is, full-on deicide and the game, and as Radiance improved to 2-0.
BMT and Cyclone literally stop attacking the Titans so their homies can make sure they pad that KD a little bit. I mean, are there any words besides toxic? But maybe they earned that little bit after that big slog of a game in Game 1. Radiance look absolutely strong today, and they might just continue to do so. We thought that maybe Cyclone Spin was a bit in a slump. He wasn't really gelling with too many gods, but now we can add Cupid to the repertoire. Heimdall's there, Rom's there. Cyclone Spin's starting to look like a more and more diverse player as the season goes on.
I think this is a big set for multiple of their players in terms of proving the God pool has expanded. Aurora shows us this Kabrak, and as you mentioned, we see this Cupid coming out from Cyclone Spin as well, adapting, kind of returning to form, it feels like a little bit here in this set. You certainly got to worry about giving him the Nemesis. A great set from Radiance to find the 2-0 here over a really strong PK Knights team. I'll get it back over to the desk, though. They can break it down from here.
Great job once again on the call there. Finch and Mifflin, and Radiance continues to win. Not without a little pushback, but the 2-0 over E United, now the 2-0 over the Knights have Radiance off to a tear here in phase number 2. They've got a matchup on Sunday against Sanguine. That'll be a lot of fun to watch, so make sure to keep your eyes on that. Let's talk about Game 2, though, here to round out the day. Gormizer over from the start, maybe is kind of the way this one looks. The Knights hung in there, adapting, absolutely flying, but just the snowball, a little bit too fast, a little bit too quick there, and Radiance take this one, not without some pushback, but somewhat easily.
this is what Game 1 was supposed to be, is the only way I can think to word it, right? Like, this is how Radiance wanted to play in Game 1, but a couple of factors didn't line up to enable it. It was maybe Adapting's performance on the Nemesis in Game 1 didn't quite scale up to what we just saw, which was phenomenal,
Yes!
and I think there was a lot of focus on trying to deal with him. I mean, look at this, the amount of peel you're able to deal with, and of course having a phenomenal blink. Unfortunately, the life was thrown away, but he still was showcasing, I think, a presence of mind in the jungle this game that we didn't get to see. There were still 3 upgraded shells on the other side to try and deal with his damage, but you could notice later in his build he does focus a little bit more on the ability damage. Alongside that, you've got huge amounts of burst from Big Man, and that kind of completes the sweep for Radiance. On the other side, it was Neil just kind of getting popped off too many times. I mean, he ran in. I think he was 0-9 at the end of the game. A lot of deaths that came through. 0-8. Sorry, giving him one more than he actually got there. Versus, Adapting's 9-1. And then when we see the next page, you'll notice, look at Cuvo Fred and look at his damage. Because for a Hebo,
it was low.
It was low. For a normal jungler, I think it's low. But for a Hebo, it's especially low. I mean, sub 8 or sub 10K, even Aurora was able to hit the 10K mark.
Yep. 2 players beneath the 5-digit mark in damage here in this game. One of them is Cuvo Fred. So polar opposites as far as the junglers go out of this one. Loved what I saw out of Adapting. This is now a Radiance team where, you go all the way to the finals of that midseason tournament. The question was, can you carry that momentum from the midseason tournament to the first couple of games here in Phase 2 and then push that further and further on? Gormizer, the answer at the moment appears to be yes. And hey, answer, what a perfect term to bring out here. Adapting, the big man himself from Game 2 here in this set, standing by with Finch to answer some questions.
Thanks, Dulce. I absolutely do have Adapt King here with us, looking great in game number 2 in particular. And I'm sorry, Adapting, I'm contractually obligated to ask. So when you make that play to save Benji's life, you block the Neath ult, then you see the notification he dies to the camp. What's going through your mind, man? Walk me through the comms in that moment.
I don't know. It just happens, right? We just tried to save him. Didn't work out, but it is what it is. I don't know. Nothing too much to say about it.
No, it didn't end up being that big of a deal, right? Because you all ended up having an excellent game there. Talk to me a bit about Cyclone Spin, expanding the God pool, showing us this Cupid as well. I think looking pretty impressive. What does it mean for you all that he's sort of getting more comfortable and expanding out what he can play?
Well, it's just always good, having more draft opportunities. It's gonna make it trickier for teams to know what to prioritize against us, and it's just feels good. OP Cupid.
Okay, well, what about a little bit more about you specifically here Adapting? Because I feel like, with last year in some of Phase 1, maybe some people were saying that, other people were catching up to you or maybe falling off a little bit, but I think you've really been showing up here for him lately. Do you listen to any of that? Do you feel like any truth to it or anything like that, or are you just focusing on you?
I mean, I would like to say that, I don't care, but I definitely do, right? When I hear that kind of stuff, it definitely eggs me on, and it makes me want to prove everyone wrong. So, I don't know. Sometimes haters are your best motivators. So, yeah.
All right. Well, the squad's looking great right now, Adapting. Thanks for taking some time to talk to me, man. I'll get it back to the desk so they can close the day out.
Thank you very much.
Sitting down with us there. Always democratic, the team man himself. Whatever. Benji died to camps. We'll brush that one under the rug. Didn't matter at the end of the day. So what? It's it's funny for us to kind of look at, but it is true in the grand scheme of things. Didn't quite turn that game around in favor of the Knights. Gormizer, we'll see here in a moment as we take a look forward as to what we still have. But Radiance have to play Sanguine this upcoming weekend. I believe you, in our pregame show, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit here, Gore. You had Sanguine 2-0 here on the week, and here is your slate for the rest of the week. Radiance Sanguine, first set of the day on Sunday. With Radiance playing like this and with Sanguine a little bit uncharacteristic, how safe is that 2-0 week feeling for you?
Already it's not, right? I mean, Sanguine already lost the ones. Yeah, so already it's been shot. But now we can zone in. Chat said, 68 some odd % said it was going to be a 1-1, and I think now that we've seen what Space Station can do, now that we've seen what Radiance can do, I don't know, dude. The 0-2 is starting to look a little bit more likely.
It's nervous.
I think Radiance, They control the early game really well there. They transition it into a great late game. Sanguine play from behind. It's what they do. They could have a 10k lead. They can have a 10k deficit. They play the exact same for the first 20 minutes of the game no matter what. It is always that 25, that 30-minute late game turnaround that makes the big difference. And a lot of it was Ghost could handle that. Some of the other teams figured out some games to handle it, but it would come down to draft and dependence on that. I feel like Radiance right now are in a really good state where they can absolutely fight back there. So Sanguine have a couple of days to really fix things up to get to that point. But otherwise, if they keep playing at this level, I think Radiance is definitely going to be able to make a huge flex this Sunday.
And I think one thing we saw there in the standings is already kind of the separation between the top 4 and the bottom 4 teams. It's one thing we've talked about pretty consistently with the longer phase. Some people, say it might be closer, but I think kind of the majority opinion is that with the longer phase, the gap between the top 4 and the bottom 4 maybe actually gets wider than what it was in phase 1. More games means more defined maybe placement there in those roles. So 3 undefeated teams remain at this point, and we'll have to see how that shakes out as the weekend goes on. Gormeister, tomorrow, Ghost Gaming and the Renegades start off our day on Saturday. What does that matchup look like to you?
Honestly, I think a lot of that, Renegades played really, really well last week, and I think that's something that they should absolutely be able to bring into this week. The problem is some of the matches they're getting are just not going to be easy wins for them, right? Playing Obey, that's one they should be able to take. Playing Knights, it's not going to be an easy win, but it's something that's, again, a closer matchup. Getting put up against Ghost is going to tax them a lot, but I think that's a good learning experience, both to see what Ghost is going to be able to bring in terms of new meta shifts and changes like that, and of course what they can do to try and counter that as they play along.
Yep.
I don't think they're coming into it expecting a win. I don't think I'm going into it expecting a Renegades win, but I think that they're going to be able to give us a good show no matter what.
It's a growing game, maybe, for the Renegades. It was a great way to kick off Week 2 here in Phase 2 of the SPL. Big win for SSG, big win for Radiance. But on behalf of myself, Gormeister, all the other casters, everyone back in production, we will see you tomorrow for a little SCC, a little SPL. Stay tuned, and we'll see you then.